Chapter 1136. Then, Lin Yu and the others entered the Sky Alliance. Then, terrifying auras emerged from the seclusion grounds one after another. They were like blazing flames that lit up the entire Sky Alliance. Welcome back, Deity King. Qin Wunyan and the others were the first to come out of seclusion. At this moment, their cultivation levels were slightly stronger than before the battle. Even though the 3 realms and 5 regions had almost entered the age of chaos due to the dark turmoil. However, after 1,000 years, the glory energy had gradually recovered and many people's cultivation realms had increased again. They knew that the glory energy could recover to the level it was before the Great War in just 1,000 years because the current deity king, Lin Yu, had helped. That was the truth. In the past 1,000 years, Lin Yu had not only traveled around the mountains and rivers, but he had also used his great power to leave something behind in every region. He had restored the Tao laws and glory energy of the 3 realms and 5 regions to the level it was before the dark turmoil. After doing all that, he returned to the Sky Alliance. After 1,000 years of recuperation, Lin Yu had also left behind some insights before he left. Sky Phoenix, Archaeosaurus, and other top fighting forces had made great progress. Sky Phoenix had even reached the peak of the half-step deity king realm. Although there was still a long way to go before she could break through to the deity king realm, it was already very shocking. Through Lin Yu's power, the physical body of the great solar Buddha had also broken free from the sun. He could now move freely between heaven and earth. After a long time, Lin Yu had broken through to the deity king realm. It seemed that some kind of restriction in the 12 universes had been broken. In the near future, a second deity king would be born. It was very likely to be the great solar Buddha. This was because he originally had the strength to break through to the deity king realm. However, he had chosen to turn into the sun out of pity for all living beings. As a result, he had given up the opportunity to break through to the deity king realm. Now, after Lin used divine power, he had reconstructed the sun. Now, the great solar Buddha had no more worries and could break through to the deity king realm in peace. Like Sky Phoenix, the great solar Buddha had reached the peak of the half-step deity king realm. Moreover, it was more condensed than Sky Phoenix. The great solar Buddha's consciousness had already reached the deity king realm before the dark turmoil. Now that his physical body was free, he believed that it would not take much time for him to break through to the next step. The 12 universes were developing in a good direction. However, Lin Yu did not let his guard down, because to the other universes were deity king realm, they were still too weak at deity king realm. Top universes deity king's deity, where deity king was deity world. The deity universe of the deity universe deity Haitoi deity universe by deity up to the Dido, the deity universe, deadly be deity. This also gave Lin Yu a chance to develop. To the end, he was deity. At that time, the ruler of Universe 10 would come in person, and no one would be able to resist his power. Lin Yu knew this very well. Now, in the 12 universes, there were no more opportunities or divine items that could support Lin Yu's rapid breakthrough in a short period of time. During these 1,000 years, Lin Yu had already found and refined all the origin materials in the entire 12 cosmoses. Although he knew that the Divine King realm was not his limit, it would take him a lot of time to break through. The ruler of Universe 10 already knew of his talent. The Jedi would not give him so much time. Because of Lin Yu's return, the entire 3 realms and 5 regions celebrated. In the Heaven Alliance, there were many beautiful women singing and dancing. After thousands of years of development, the current 12 universes had recovered to some extent, and there were scenes of prosperity everywhere. However, only the higher-ups like the Dark Divine Priest knew what kind of threat lay beneath this bustling scene. It had already escalated to a war between 2 universes. If he failed, it would mean that the 12 universes would truly cease to exist. It was even more terrifying than the time of the dark turmoil. The night passed quickly. In the courtyard behind the main hall, Lin Yu stood in front of a pool. At this moment, Bai Xiaoli's figure appeared. Are there any opportunities in the 10 great sacred lands that are of great use to divine kings? Lin Yu looked at the arowana swaying at the bottom of the pool and asked calmly. Now, Lin Yu is the common master of the 12 universes and respected by all living beings. When the time came, it was impossible for him to hide because of the arrival of the 10th universe. After a long time, when he broke through to an unimaginable realm, he would return. He was no longer the little cultivator who was struggling to cross the heavenly tribulation among the masses of living beings. Now he needed to consider all living things in the 12 universes. Now there are only 2 kinds of divine items that can help divine kings break through quickly. Bai Xiaoli said seriously. I'm sure you know about the origin materials. You've refined everything in the 12 universes. As for the abominable origin, I believe you don't want to come into contact with it. Bai Xiaoli's eyes were filled with melancholy as she looked into the distance. It was as if she had passed through the boundaries of the 12 universes and seen an unknown place. Calculating the time, the 10 great sacred lands seemed to be about to meet the 12 universes. Bai Xiaoli said, it was because the 10 great sacred lands met the 12 universes every million years. With the help of that power, his consciousness escaped and came to the 12 universes. However, he also paid a heavy price for it. When he was weak, he was ambushed by the 6-winged divine king. As a result, his physical body had not merged with his consciousness. But now, the 10 great sacred lands are about to hold a grand event. There will be great opportunities. Bai Xiaoli looked at Lin Yu. The 10 great sacred lands were originally just a cage. In the development of history, forces from other universes gradually invaded it. They even signed contracts with the imprisoned monster kings and established the sacred lands. After millions of years of development, the 10 great sacred lands also have a force. They want to absorb my power, but the monster kings are not ordinary. Now, that force is completely under my control. Bai Xiaoli snorted. The beings from other universes underestimated the monster kings too much. His status in the 10 great holy lands held him in high regard. And this grand event would be accompanied by battles. In the sacred land he was in, if not for Bai Xiaoli, it was very likely that it would be in danger of being annexed. And his physical body was still suppressed. Even if the 2 were to merge, it would be difficult for him to recover to his peak in at least a few thousand years. Therefore, when the 12 universes met the 10 great sacred lands, it would be difficult to open a passage to return. He had purposely brought this up in hopes that Lin Yu would lend him a helping hand at the 10 great holy lands grand meeting. I'll follow you to the 10 great sacred lands. Lin Yu did not look at Bai Xiaoli, but said calmly. Bai Xiaoli was touched. You've helped me a lot since we met. Why can't I do something for you now? Lin Yu said. Bai Xiaoli nodded heavily. I didn't misjudge you. However, there are indeed unimaginable opportunities in the grand event. But with your strength at the godly king realm, you might not be able to survive. Bai Xiaoli continued. The 10 great sacred lands were unimaginably powerful, and each of them had more than one godly king realm expert. From what Lin Yu understood, Bai Xiaoli's strength was definitely not at the godly king realm, but at an even higher realm. If he went like this, it was very likely that he would not be able to return. Have I, Lin Yu, ever been afraid of anything? Lin Yu only answered calmly. Bai Xiaoli sighed. Then let's prepare to set off in 2 years. Time passed. In 2 years, Lin Yu appeared in the Heaven Alliance square many times to preach Tao to everyone. Many cultivators' cultivation and comprehension had improved tremendously. In the end, the entire Heaven Alliance could not squeeze in. Lin Yu used his means to reflect his figure in the 3 realms and 5 regions, allowing everyone to have a chance to listen. 2 years passed quickly. Chapter 1137. In the main hall, everyone's heart was filled with melancholy. Lin Yu stood silently in the center of the main hall. The power of the divine king realm was fully displayed. Today was the day he left the 12 universes. Now, the upper echelons of the Heavenly Alliance were all here. This time, leaving the 12 universes, the road ahead was vast and filled with great danger. Therefore, Lin Yu did not plan to bring anyone with him, only himself and Baishali. Supreme Buddha, after I leave, the 12 universes will be in your hands. Lin Yu entrusted him with the task. He left behind a special method in the 12 universes. When necessary, it could protect them. The great Solar Buddha nodded. In the past, the weak divine king in his eyes could now take charge and become the master of the 12 universes. I still remember that many years ago, Your Highness came to borrow power. Now, it's me who needs to borrow the power of the divine king. The great Solar Buddha smiled. Your Highness, don't worry. Leave it to me. The great Solar Buddha was now infinitely close to the divine king realm. Even now, facing the six-winged divine king and the mastermind alone, he had the power to protect himself. His divine king realm was incomparably solid. He was not like the six-winged divine king who used the abominable origin to absorb all spirits to break through. When the war with the 10th universe began, the great Solar Buddha would definitely be an unimaginable fighting force. Lin Yu nodded. Then, after bidding farewell to Qin Yi, Goddess Yuqing, and the others, he did not linger and used falsified heaven of the great void 8 tribes. When he rescued by Xiaoli's consciousness, Lin Yu left a mark in the 10 square world, which was the sacred ground. Now that time had passed, he could use this mark to go to the 10 square world. Now that Lin Yu had reached the divine king realm, his Tao and divine skills had reached the transformative realm. As his figures slowly disappeared, this time, no one knew when they would see Lin Yu again, until Lin Yu's aura completely disappeared. Only then did they leave the main hall. At this point, everyone was feeling pressured. They didn't want to be involved in the great war that would happen many years later. They didn't want to be involved in the chaos of the darkness. They wouldn't be able to play any role at all. They could only watch helplessly as Lin Yu fought with his enemies. When the godly king returns, we will definitely surprise him. When the time comes, we will take the initiative to attack Universe 10. Qin Wunyan muttered in his heart. In front of Lin Yu's statue, several shrines were built. Among them were Lin Xiu, the Realm Sea Lord, and a few others. They were all heroes who had passed away in the dark turmoil. There was an endless stream of incense here every day. After 1,000 years, this place was already shrouded in the divine light of incense. It was as if the true spirits of the Realm Sea Lord and the others were slowly being gathered. In that battle, their bodies and souls had already been destroyed, and even their true spirits had been absorbed by the abominable essence. However, when Lin Yu flipped through the ancient books, he had only managed to find a few words about it. He hoped that through the sacrifices between heaven and earth, these people would reappear. At this moment, the incense and faith of the 3 realms and 5 regions were all gathered here. Vaguely, a few shrines had already gained some kind of divinity. It allowed the living beings who sacrificed here to obtain some benefits. Some were cured of all diseases, and some were improved in cultivation. 10 square world. Lin Yu and Baishali's figures gradually appeared here. What entered their eyes was a desolate place, accompanied by mountains of corpses that didn't lose their divine forms. A mysterious and unfamiliar aura was emitted. It made it difficult for Lin Yu to adapt in a short period of time. The Tao laws here were very different from the 12 universes. Back then, when Lin Yu was weak, he didn't feel much when he came here. But now that he had broken through to the godly king realm, he felt it more and more. It even had a great restriction on his strength now. After Baishali arrived here, the power of his divine sense was steaming like flames and gradually became active, because this place was suppressing his physical body. At this moment, they were so close that the two of them had a reaction. Now, the 10 monster kings shouldn't have awakened yet. Baishali said. This was the first time he explained the 10 monster kings to Lin Yu. There was a proud look in his eyes. It seems that until now, only I have awakened ahead of time. All of them are really disappointing. After Baishali returned to the 10 square world, he immediately sensed it. As for the other sacred grounds, there was also a preliminary development. The 10 monster kings originally came from the same origin, and there was a special connection between them. But because of a great battle, all of them were sealed. So for a long time, it was difficult for them to escape. At that time, Vaishali was the only one who had managed to escape. Perhaps his strength wasn't outstanding among the 10 monster kings, but a long time ago, his divine sense was the strongest existence among the 10 monster kings. This was also the reason why his divine sense was able to escape first. Although the 10 monster kings are still sealed, they are all in the 10 sacred grounds. With the help of the power of other universes, they developed unimaginable forces, and there is no lack of divine king realm experts. Vaishali furrowed her brows and reminded him. In fact, after such a long time, there might even be some experts who have reached that level. After the divine king realm, there's still a long way to go. Now, the divine kings of these universes are just like children to us, the 10 monster kings. They are not worthy of our attention. At the same time, he looked at Linyu, which meant that he included Linyu in it. Then, Vaishali explained to Linyu the realms after the divine king realm. After the divine king realm, it was the ancestor realm that fused with the foundation of the universe. After that, it was the origin realm that formed a universe of its own, taking the meaning of origin. The origin substance that Linyu obtained required this realm to condense. This surprised Linyu slightly. What he did not expect was that the origin substance could also be condensed. The later realms, even a small step, require endless time to hone. Vaishali reminded. At the later realms, it was no longer possible to advance by leaps and bounds like before. Not only did it require time, it also required unimaginable opportunities. Of course, although the origin realm can transform into a universe, it is far from comparable to the 12 universes. Vaishali continued. After all, these 12 universes were created by a true supreme being, a true God of creation. No living being can surpass him. At this point, Vaishali's breathing could not help but quicken. This was the second time she mentioned the God of creation, but each time it was a taboo, and she did not dare to mention it easily. After the origin realm, it was Tao induction, then Tao severing, and finally Tao leaving. Vaishali did not mention the last realm after that. She kept quiet about it. As for the realms after the origin god, Vaishali only briefly mentioned it and did not explain too much to Linyu. She was worried that Linyu would bite off more than he could chew. Then what realm were you at before you were sealed? Linyu could not help but ask. Vaishali shook her head. It's far more terrifying than you can imagine. Knowing too much now is not good for you. Linyu did not ask any more questions. He had a general understanding of Vaishali's realm. At the very least, she had surpassed the origin god. When he obtained his physical body, he could easily crush the six-winged god king to death. Clearly, it was not a baseless statement. The 10 great sacred lands are about to hold a grand meeting. Why are you so worried? Is it because your strength is very weak? Linyu asked at this moment. Bah, my faction is the top existence in the 10 great sacred lands. Why would I be worried about you? Kid, I'm here for you to obtain a fortune. Don't take my kindness for granted. Vaishali rolled her eyes. However, her expression did betray her. Linyu's face was full of disbelief. Then, Vaishali said snappily, over the years, those little bastards have declined. They are no longer as prosperous as they were in the past. And this grand meeting contained the secrets of the 10 great sacred lands. The winning faction would obtain unimaginable items that could help the monster kings escape. Chapter 1138. This was a mysterious factor. Every million years, the 10 holy lands would only produce a single strand. It could weaken the seal of the 10 great monster kings. The birth of the mysterious factor would be accompanied by a rich source of origin substance. It was extremely useful for divine kings and even ancestor realm experts. Within a million years, the mysterious factor produced by the 10 great saint lands was too little. It was only enough for one monster king to absorb. This was the reason why the 10 great saint lands held a grand event to allow their forces to compete for the mysterious factor. As long as I have the mysterious factor, I could try to break free from the seal. Vaishali said solemnly. The ownership of the mysterious factor this time was too important to him. He could sense that his seal was the weakest it had ever been in such a long time. It was a rare opportunity. If he missed it, he might not have another chance. The only thing that worried him was that since his seal had weakened, the 10 great monster kings originated from the same body. Presumably, their seals would be the same. This meant that the competition this time would be very intense. There might be unimaginable juniors among the 10 great monster kings' forces who had been dormant for countless years who would take action personally. Bai Xiaoli's forces were weak now, with only 3 divine king realm experts. This was undoubtedly going to be extremely difficult. That was why Bai Xiaoli asked Lin Yu to come here to help her forces. Lin Yu nodded. Don't worry, leave the competition to me. Bai Xiaoli had helped him a lot. Lin Yu would not stand by and watch the competition for the mysterious factor. Thank you. Bai Xiaoli expressed her gratitude, which was rare. Under Bai Xiaoli's lead, the two of them headed towards the center of the 10-direction world, where Bai Xiaoli's forces were located. The 10-direction world was divided into the upper 5 symbols continent, which was the sky, and the lower 5 elements continent, which was the earth. The land was vast and boundless, comparable to the 12 universes. It was hard to imagine that it was just a sealed cage. Lin Yu came to the altar where Bai Xiaoli was sealed back then, but it was only at the border of the 10-direction world. Now, just the journey to the 5 symbols continent alone took up a large amount of time. The 10 great holy lands were dominated by the monster race. In the entire 10-square world, only the edge of the lower 5 elements continent was ruled by the human race and other creatures. As for the rest of the vast continents, they were in the hands of the demon race. They were incomparably prosperous, and their development was shocking. As time passed, Lin Yu and Bai Xiaochun passed through one ancient teleportation formation after another, arriving at the strongest ancient power in the 10 Directions world. It was the Holy Land that Bai Xiaoli had founded all those years ago. The huge continent was like a dream. There were many immortal islands floating on it. There was an ancient formation on it that was incomparably powerful. Even Lin Yu felt his heart palpitate when he saw the formation runes left on the immortal island. Now that the event was about to begin, a large number of demons had already gathered here. There was no lack of Saint Realm experts among them. However, all of them were demons. Some of them had chosen to transform, but they still retained the characteristics of their race's bloodline. In front of the huge mountain gate, there were 9 pillars that reached up to the sky. Ancient runes were engraved on them, and each pillar had a different rune. Among them, there was a 9-tailed celestial fox that enlightened all living beings and suppressed evil. The demons that came and went had to pay their respects to the 9 pillars one by one before they could proceed. Lin Yu looked at Lin Yu and the 9 pillars. He couldn't help but smile with pride. These 9 pillars were casually erected to commemorate me. I didn't expect that after so many years, these demons would still remember me. There was a sigh in his words, but there was an unconcealable pride on his face. Obviously, it was for Lin Yu to see. Lin Yu didn't pay much attention to Bai Xiaoli's showing off. He just followed suit and bowed slightly to the 9 pillars. Then he walked forward. In front of him was a stairway that he couldn't see the end of. It was made of blue stone and it was ancient. Every step seemed to carry down marks, which made one feel like they were comprehending the Tao. This was made by me in the past. It was to test the living beings in the 10-direction world to see if they were qualified to join the sacred ground. It's also beneficial for divine kings. Don't miss it, Bai Xiaoli said. Now, he only had his consciousness. At this moment, he stayed in Lin Yu's body and explained to him. Lin Yu nodded. He wouldn't let go of an opportunity that could help him to improve. He knew that Bai Xiaoli's true cultivation realm was definitely beyond his imagination. The things that he left behind wouldn't be ordinary either. Just as he was about to step onto the stairway, there was a shout. Then 2 6-tailed foxes blocked his path. Stop! Humans are not allowed to enter. The 2 6-tailed foxes were already in the Sage-to-Be realm. At this moment, their tails blocked Lin Yu outside. Why? Lin Yu asked calmly. It's a special period now. Humans are not allowed to enter the Heavenly Island. The 6-tailed fox explained. Then, the other fox said unhappily, I said that humans are not allowed to enter. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. The two six-tailed foxes looked unfriendly. Meanwhile, the monsters who passed by all looked at Lin Yu from the corner of their eyes and whispered, "Why is there an ignorant human who dares to come to the heavenly island? Doesn't he know his place?" Everyone around him was mocking him. However, because their cultivation realm was too low, they couldn't see through Lin Yu's cultivation realm. This was the territory of Baishali's force. Lin Yu didn't want to attract too much attention, so he didn't release his divine king aura. But now, he was being chased away. "Is there such a rule in the force you founded?" Lin Yu asked Baishali in his body. "What bullsh asterisk T rule? When I founded the sacred ground, all living beings were equal. Now, which junior dares to go against it?" Baishali stomped her feet in anger. "No wonder the sacred ground has been weak all these years. There's a reason." However, Baishali couldn't reveal her true form now. Otherwise, she would have to punish these juniors. "Since you didn't set such a rule, it's good. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble." Lin Yu said, "I remember the nine-tailed sky fox. Your old master said that all living beings are equal. Be it monsters, humans, or others, everyone should have a right to enter the heavenly island." Lin Yu said calmly. Being questioned, the faces of the two six-tailed foxes turned pale. "Are you looking for trouble? Break his teeth and take him away." With that, the two six-tailed foxes attacked Lin Yu. At this moment, the surrounding demon tribe members were all mocking him, without a single shred of pity. Lin Yu looked at the foxtails that were coming at him. "Since that's the case, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your old master," Lin Yu said casually. The foxtail that was rushing towards him was instantly shattered. Blood splattered everywhere. Along with the two six-tailed foxes, they were sent flying and slammed onto the stairs. The two six-tailed foxes were in disbelief. In the 10-square world, the human race was weak. They couldn't figure out when such a strong human was born. Before the two six-tailed foxes could react, Lin Yu slapped them across the air and sent them flying again. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. More than half of the teeth of the six-tailed foxes were knocked out by this slap. And this was because Lin Yu held back. If they weren't from Baishali's faction, Lin Yu's slap wouldn't have just sent them flying. He would have taken their lives. Everything happened too quickly. Everyone's jaws dropped. Some of the monsters even had their mouths open in an O shape. This human is so strong. He's at least a saint, right? Some people guessed. But more people were in disbelief and anger. Because in the course of history, the human race had always been at the bottom of the 10-square world. But now, he dared to beat up the monsters guarding the gate of the sacred ground. This was an unforgivable offense. Even if you're a saint of the human race, you can't escape punishment for insulting the people of the sacred ground. At this moment, the people of the sacred ground sensed the commotion. A few more powerful monsters appeared, but when they said one sentence, Lin Yu sent them flying with a casual slap. Many of their bones were broken, although after reaching their realm, their recovery ability was astonishing. The pain was still unavoidable. Chapter 1139. Although Lin Yu had not fully adapted to the Tao laws of the 10-direction world, causing his realm to not be very stable, he was still an invincible existence to these demonic beasts who were only sage to be. In just a few exchanges, countless members of the demon clan had fallen here. Lin Yu slowly stepped onto the steps. He no longer cared about the demon clan members who had fallen to the side, groaned, or fainted. His goal was not to start a massacre here, because he knew that the current situation, discrimination against creatures other than the demon clan, was not caused by these ordinary demon clan members. There was a subtle influence, and the only one who could affect the entire demon clan was the current master of the Holy Land. As Lin Yu stepped onto the steps, sure enough, there was a mysterious aura, incomparably grand. Waves of chanting sounds rang out, causing Lin Yu's heart to become clear. These steps were like the veins and backbone of a great universe, and they gave birth to a profound power. For a moment, Lin Yu fell into a state of enlightenment. His comprehension of the progenitor realm became deeper and deeper. When he was in the saint realm, He had seen this step. This was also the reason why he could crush the mastermind and the six-winged Divine King when he broke through to the early stage of the Divine King realm. Now, with Baishali's assistance, Lin Yu's comprehension of the progenitor realm in his body became deeper and deeper. Before long, it was like a road. Now, not only the entrance, but a large section of the road ahead, the fog was dispelled. Although he had not stepped on it yet, it became clear. The progenitor realm was the atavism of life level, fusing with the origin of the universe. When Lin Yu was in the saint realm, he had come into contact with the origin matter, which was of great benefit to living beings. This was also the main reason why Lin Yu used the origin matter as a guide to comprehend the progenitor realm. As Lin Yu stepped forward, endless Tao laws turned into dense chaotic qi and gathered towards Lin Yu. Everyone was shocked by this scene. How many years had it been since the heavenly ancient road had undergone such a change? Even the holy maiden, who had the greatest talent in the demon race since ancient times, did not cause such a phenomenon when she first set foot here. The supreme might of the ancient Tao continued to spread out and converge towards Lin Yu. At this moment, Lin Yu could feel that not only had the path ahead been illuminated, even his God-King cultivation had been stabilized once more. Lin Yu was already at the righteous God level. Borrowing the recognition of the 12 cosmos edicts, he reached the righteous God level. But in the 10-square world, it was difficult to restrict them. Now, he seemed to have adapted to the Tao laws of the 10-direction world because of the ancient Tao. On top of that, his strength had also improved yet again, reaching the pinnacle of the principal God realm. This originally required a long period of time to settle down. As Lin Yu reached the end of the stairs, he actually reached this step. If he could obtain the massive amount of origin substance from the 10 Great Holy Lands Grand Ceremony, Lin Yu would definitely be able to break through and reach the final realm of the God King realm, the true over-God realm. At this realm, one could truly be called the ruler of a universe. As Lin Yu arrived at the heavenly island, he stood at the end of the stairs. But now no one dared to stop him. To be able to cause such a phenomenon, one's talent was definitely unprecedented. This was because the ancient Tao did not emit a corresponding phenomenon based on one's cultivation realm. It was completely dependent on the talent of a living being. Obviously, Lin Yu's talent was enough to make everyone fearful. Moreover, from Lin Yu's attack, one could see how terrifying his strength was. With just a raise of his hand, he could make a safe-to-be guard lose his ability to fight. This kind of strength and means, even in the saint realm, was at the top. In the current sacred grounds, there were only a few people like him. None of the demon clans could understand how the human clan, which lived in a remote corner of the world, could produce such an expert with so few resources. The commotion finally attracted the attention of the sacred grounds lord. 7 foxtails covered the sky, and a terrifying aura instantly filled the place. All the monster race knelt on the ground, and their faces were filled with fear. This was because they could feel the killing intent from the sacred grounds lord. It was too piercingly cold. This was the strength of the God King realm, the strongest person in the 10-direction world. Lin Yu was still calm in the face of this aura. This aura was at the over-God realm, but to Lin Yu, it was not invincible. Human, do you know your crime? At this moment, the sacred grounds lord was in the sky, and his cold eyes were filled with immortal light, as if he could burst out at any time to kill Lin Yu. I'm just trying to reason with the weak sacred grounds. How arrogant. You want to kill me with just words? Lin Yu asked. I am the master of the 10-direction world. Do you have any objections to my words? The sacred grounds lord struck. The 7 foxtails formed a powerful technique. Each of the foxtails seemed to be giving birth to a universe. A terrifying aura filled the air. Under this terrifying aura, the second palace lord was also here. He was also at the God King realm. At this moment, he escorted all the monster race down the heavenly island, and at the same time, activated the island's protective barrier. They now knew that Lin Yu was also at the God King realm, and it was very condensed. Although he was at the righteous God realm, the aura he emitted was not weaker than the sacred grounds lord. Lin Yu did not show the slightest bit of fear in the face of the vast attack. He was still standing on the spot. The Emperor's sword appeared in his hand, and with a wave of his hand, he shattered the small worlds that the foxtails carried. Boundless divine power ripples spread out. The entire heavenly island was shaking. This made the monster race below tremble, and they knelt on the ground, not daring to raise their heads. It had been many years since a battle between divine kings had taken place in the Holy Land. Is this expert here to seek justice for the human race? Is he asking for a redistribution of resources? Someone guessed. When they recalled what Lin Yu had said, he seems to have some understanding of the ancestors' words. Could it be? Thinking of this, the monster race shook their heads. The ancestor disappeared when the sacred grounds were first established. This person can't have seen him, and he's just a human. However, the monster race was not sure. It was impossible for a human to break through to the God King realm in a place where resources were scarce without help. There was only one possibility. The ancestor of the sacred grounds who had disappeared for many years had such strength. Thinking of this, the monster race felt as if they were in an ice cellar. However, they also hoped that the sacred grounds lord would suppress this arrogant human. After all, the monster race's position in their hearts was not something that other living beings could provoke. Now that they were being treated like this, even if the other party was an unimaginable expert, it made them feel uneasy. Terrifying residual power was being emitted. If it were not for the unimaginable barrier in the heavenly island that blocked most of the residual power, the five-elephant continent would have been penetrated by the two of them as they fought. The third palace master was currently in seclusion. The second palace master was maintaining the barrier. Lin Yu was still standing in the same place. Seeing how powerful Lin Yu was, the sacred grounds lord frowned. Second junior sister, activate the barrier and kill this man. The sacred grounds lord said coldly. This human expert is just a little too aggressive. He didn't do anything wrong. Just punish him a little, there's no need to kill him. The second palace master frowned and hesitated. You don't even listen to me? The sacred grounds lord shouted. Activate the barrier quickly and kill this human. The second palace master fell into hesitation. However, under the sacred grounds lord's reprimand, she turned the barrier into an attack. On the heavenly island, a terrifying killing intent was spreading, and a power that could wipe out everything was gathering. The barrier turned into immortal divine gold chains, imprisoning Lin Yu's body. It was difficult for him to break free. This was the method that Bai Xiaoli had left behind before she was sealed. Not to mention a God King realm expert, even an ancestor realm expert would have to die. Chapter 1140. Lin Yu just looked at her indifferently. I'll let you know the consequences of provoking the sacred ground. The sacred ground master smiled, her eyes filled with ruthlessness. As an overgod, she controlled the entire sacred ground, but she couldn't do anything to an orthodox god in such a short time. This caused endless killing intent to rise in her heart. However, the second palace master was sighing. Only she knew that if a divine king expert helped them in the banquet, they would have a much higher chance of winning. However, the sacred ground master, her senior sister, was stubborn. There was no other way. As the attack of the barrier approached, everyone knew that Lin Yu wouldn't be able to survive. Such an attack was enough to penetrate the entire 10-square world and destroy the boundless land. Moreover, it was only targeting a living being. However, just when everyone thought the dust had settled, a mysterious force shrouded the entire heavenly island. Then, the attack of the barrier disappeared inexplicably. In the end, with a sigh, everything vanished into thin air. The second palace master's expression changed drastically, because she found that the barrier was out of her control. At this moment, it was operating on its own. Everything in this place was sealed off. The Lord of the Holy Land was now in a state of panic. He was directly suppressed to the ground by the power of the boundary, which intertwined with the Tao marks. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't get up. What's going on? The sacred ground master looked at the second palace master. She thought that she controlled the barrier and suppressed it. I don't know why, but the barrier is out of my control. The two of them looked at Lin Yu at the same time. At this moment, he was giving off the aura of the 10-square world. It was like an abyss that was difficult to reach. The entire heavenly domain was sealed. It was difficult for news to spread. The demons below were all horrified. They did not know what was happening above them. A terrifying pressure spread out. It was the suppression of the bloodline. The sacred ground master knelt on the ground. Her body couldn't help but tremble. At this moment, the second palace master realized something. This pressure, other than the ancestor, could not belong to anyone else. Ignorant juniors. I merely disappeared for a period of time, and the entire 10-square world was reduced to such a state because of you. At this moment, Bai Xiaoli took control of Lin Yu's body. There was a cold light in his eyes, like two celestial swords, staring straight at the Lord of the Holy Land. The pressure of the nine-tailed celestial fox spread out. The Holy Land Lord spat out a mouthful of blood. Ancestor, you're free? The second palace master was pleasantly surprised. She was not suppressed by Bai Xiaoli. At this moment, he knelt down beside Bai Xiaoli. However, Bai Xiaoli did not pay any attention to the second palace master. Instead, a cold glint flashed in her eyes as she stared down at the Lord of the Holy Land. At his current level, he could easily control the barrier. How could the master of the sacred area not know that the person before him was none other than the founder of the sacred area, the nine-tailed celestial fox ancestor? Spare my life, patriarch! Spare my life! The Holy Land Lord repeatedly begged for mercy. At that moment, he was scared out of his wits. Even if Bai Xiaoli's strength had not recovered, the pressure from the bloodline was hard to resist. Bai Xiaoli was the absolute ruler of the 10-square world. No one could resist her. Have you forgotten the warning from back then? Bai Xiaoli questioned again. I dare not. Ancestor, the pressure of the grand event is too great, and the human race is too weak. It will only affect the grand event. That's why I ordered that the human race is not allowed to enter the heavenly island. The Holy Landlord was still explaining. All living things are equal. What right do you have to exclude the human race? Bai Xiaoli did not listen to the Holy Land Lord's explanation. I finally know why the 10-square world is weak now. This is the reason. The second palace master did not dare to say anything. She had already realized this point, but her senior sister did not listen to her and insisted on doing what she wanted. It was not until a long time later that, Bai Xiaoli released her pressure, the Holy Land Lord was relieved. He welcomed Lin Yu into the main hall of the heavenly island. The third palace master also sensed Bai Xiaoli's aura and came out of seclusion in advance. This time, Bai Xiaoli did not want to expose the fact that her consciousness had escaped, so she only summoned the three palace masters. They were the three strongest beasts in the 10-direction world. At this time, Bai Xiaoli's consciousness had already left Lin Yu's body. She was sitting in the main hall, and her eyes were incomparably cold. This caused the three palace masters to feel enormous pressure. Congratulations on escaping, ancestor. The third palace master was kneeling on the ground, cupping his hands. Seeing this, the other two palace masters did the same. However, the Holy Landlord's forehead was covered in cold sweat. You are very disappointing, especially you. Bai Xiaoli pointed at the Holy Landlord. Ancestor, you're right. The Holy Land Lord knelt on the ground, not daring to raise his head. From today onwards, you will take over the position of the Holy Landlord, and you will assist from the side. After this grand event is over, you will face the wall for 10,000 years. Bai Xiaoli looked at the second palace master, and her words were full of majesty. Ancestor, you can't do this. I don't care about worldly affairs. The only person who can take charge of the situation is senior sister. The second palace master was kneeling and refused repeatedly. What kind of situation can she take charge of? Bai Xiaoli snorted. At this time, the Holy Landlord's face was ashen, but he did not dare to refute. So, do you have any objections? Bai Xiaoli looked at the Holy Landlord, whose face was ashen. I have no objections. The 10-square world's weakness is indeed caused by the younger generation. It is reasonable to remove the Holy Landlord's position. The Holy Land Lord knelt on the ground, but his face was full of unwillingness. Ancestor, please reconsider. The second palace master knelt and kowtowed repeatedly. If you remove senior sister's position at this time, it will have a great impact on the grand event later. Although she was dissatisfied with the Holy Land Lord's stubbornness, the three sisters were as close as brothers. They would not part on bad terms and cause the entire 10-square world to fall into chaos just because of the Holy Landlord's position. Vaishali was silent. She just looked at the three kneeling demons below. The great pressure made the three demons feel a chill down their spines. After a long time, Vaishali spoke again. Then we will wait until the grand event is over and see how you perform. After hearing Vaishali's words, the three palace masters secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The Holy Landlord was also happy. Thank you for your kindness, Ancestor. For the grand event, the younger generation will do their best and will not hesitate to die. The Holy Landlord knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times. Although Vaishali had been sealed for countless years, she was after all the founder of a holy land. Her words were able to control people's hearts. Even Linyu, who was standing at the side, could not help but admire her. This is the current deity king of the 12 universes. Next, she will help you enter the grand event to compete for the mysterious factor. Vaishali said to the 3 palace masters. The Holy Land Lord apologized to Linyu. Deity king, please don't take what happened just now to heart. Only now did she realize that he was the deity king of a universe. It was no wonder that although he was only an overgod, he could not be defeated by her, and even showed signs of being suppressed. Linyu replied indifferently, I came to the 10-square world only to repay the favor of your ancestor. Everything else is not important. Then, Vaishali entered the secret place of the heavenly island to cultivate in seclusion, in order to recover her weak consciousness. The 3 palace masters brought Linyu to the resting place in the palace. As for the grand event, the Holy Landlord said, Linyu, as the deity king of a universe, had come from afar. He would rest for 2 days first, and then discuss it properly. The heavenly palace was built majestically, with many palaces stretching up and down. Most of the demons here were in human form, and they walked in an orderly manner. Along the way, birds chirped and flowers bloomed, and strange rocks were ugly and clumsy. There were insect-type demons, collecting honey from the flowers and used it to brew wine. Chapter 1141. It was hard to imagine that such a force could be developed in such a wasteland. They passed through many courtyards and finally stopped at a palace. There were many disciples of the monster clan here. All of them were cultivating. It was obvious that the master of the sacred land hoped that Linyu would have the opportunity to guide these disciples in his spare time. However, Linyu only glanced at them indifferently. Then, he entered the residence. The respectful attitude of the 3 palace masters attracted the attention of the disciples. After Linyu entered the room, they started to discuss among themselves. Most of the monster clan here had transformed into human form and were cultivating in human form. Xiaoyu, come here. The second palace master called a woman over. She had a pair of fox ears in her black hair. She was tall and slender, with a slim waist. Her charm was just right, and her beauty was indescribable. She was like a beauty that had walked out of a painting. As he walked, he attracted the attention of a group of male disciples. However, they knew the identity of the woman and did not dare to be too ostentatious. They just swallowed their saliva secretly. This is the divine king of the 12 universes. He will be staying here for the next few days. If you have the opportunity, you can learn from him. The second palace master said, From what I can see, this lord doesn't seem very old. Bayu was puzzled. However, when she heard that he was the divine king of the other universes, her expression changed. Her limpid eyes shone with splendor. However, with her cold personality, she did not show it. Bayu was known as a peerless genius in the 10-square world. She had unlimited potential and was cultivated by the 3 palace masters. She was known as someone who could surpass the master of the sacred land. As long as she could cultivate wholeheartedly, her future achievements would be limitless. The master of the sacred land had arranged Lin Yu's residence here for his own selfish reasons. They all hoped that Baiyu could come into contact with the cultivation techniques of the other universes to prove herself. Then, the three palace masters left one after another. The grand event would be held a year later. They were all preparing anxiously. His 10-square world had been weak for too long. On the surface, there were only 3 divine king realm experts, and that was all. When the grand event came, there was no chance for them to win. Fortunately, Lin Yu had joined the team. After all, he was a godly king of a universe. His means and strength were things that the Holy Landmaster had seen before. He was definitely not weaker than her. After the 3 palace masters left, Baiyu looked into the room with sparkling eyes. She was obsessed with cultivation. Ordinary people, even those who were known as geniuses, could not catch her eye. However, when she glanced at Lin Yu just now, she couldn't help but feel curious. Although ordinary experts knew simple techniques to retain their youthful appearance, they were still able to retain their youthful appearance. However, Lin Yu's body clearly did not have the aura of the vicissitudes of life left behind by time. That meant that Lin Yu had not cultivated for a very long time. He was not an old monster. Yet, at such a young age, he had already broken through the godly king realm and become the ruler of a universe. This undoubtedly left a mystery in Baiyu's heart. After struggling for a while, she ordered people to bring spirit fruits and other things to the door. "Senior, have you rested?" Baiyu knocked on the door. Because she was of the fox race, her voice had a hint of seduction. If it were any ordinary person, they would not be able to withstand this voice. "What's the matter?" Lin Yu asked indifferently in the room. "No, I'm here to deliver some spirit fruits to you, Senior." Facing such an expert, Bai Xiaoli instinctively revealed a timid look. "Come in." Lin Yu was sitting cross-legged on the bed. Bai Xiaoli pushed open the door. It was only then that she could see Lin Yu's appearance clearly. Although he was not as handsome as Jade, he was extraordinarily handsome. He had a different aura about him that made one want to take a few more glances at him. Baiyu's gaze lingered on Lin Yu's face for a long time, until Lin Yu spoke. "If there's nothing else, don't disturb me." Lin Yu was asking her to leave. Baiyu could not help but be stunned. She thought to herself, this senior is way too unreasonable. However, she was still somewhat indignant. "Senior, is there anything else?" Lin Yu opened his eyes and looked at Baiyu. Facing such a deep gaze, Baiyu felt that some of her thoughts could not be hidden. She could not help but falter, not daring to speak for a while. This made her very upset. In the eyes of the Heavenly Island's disciples, she had always been incomparably cold, like a fairy from the 9th heaven who could not be blasphemed. However, facing Lin Yu now, her state of mind was unconsciously stirred. This feeling had never appeared in front of the 3 palace masters. "Senior, can I ask you some questions about cultivation?" Baiyu finally plucked up her courage and asked. Lin Yu did not speak for a long time. Baiyu's heart was in a mess, and her face flushed red. "What's the question? Speak." Lin Yu sighed. With his current realm, cultivating according to the rules would not increase his strength much. Now he was just thinking about his future path, so he was not disturbed. "Well," Baiyu did not know what to say. "The aura in your body is a little chaotic. It's a problem with the cultivation method." Lin Yu saw through Baiyu's problem at a glance. However, this was the origin of the cultivation method. Even the 2nd palace master could not do anything about it. In the end, he could only tell Baiyu that she needed time to settle down. This is the after effect of rapid improvement in cultivation. You just need to spend some time. Lin Yu continued. Now that he was in the divine king realm, he naturally could not be compared to before. He directly pointed out Baiyu's problem. However, after hearing Lin Yu's words, Baiyu's eyes unconsciously revealed a hint of sadness. She had not been in the Heavenly Island for long. Although her talent was amazing, and she had broken through to the Sage-to-Be realm in tens of thousands of years. However, it left many problems. She wanted to make a contribution to the event. Therefore, in this period of time, if she wanted to break through to the Saint realm, she would be qualified to participate in the grand event. However, According to what Lin Yu and the second palace master said, now that the grand event was approaching, it was no longer possible. If she forced herself to break through now, it would only hurt her foundation and affect her future path. Seeing Bai Yu's sad eyes, Lin Yu sighed softly. He saw that the divine king's order, which had merged with his body, emitted the power of time and instantly filled Bai Yu's body. It was as if thousands of years had passed in an instant. Activate the cultivation method, Lin Yu reminded lightly. Bai Yu's eyes were filled with surprise. She found that the flow of time around her had suddenly sped up by many times. She couldn't help but feel overjoyed and shocked at the same time. This divine king from the 12 universes actually had the ability to control time. One should know that the rules of time were too mysterious. Even the ancestor realm in the ancient books did not record anyone who had mastered it. However, now was not the time to let her imagination run wild. Bai Yu immediately sat on the ground with her legs crossed and began to activate the cultivation method in her body. She was emitting a faint, clear light all over her body. 2 hours passed. Bai Yu felt that the power in her body did not seem to be as weak as before. She could not help but moan. Her flirtatious and charming voice was heard outside the door. This startled some of the disciples who were cultivating. At the same time, some of the male disciples were wailing. "This is too fast, my saintess." Everyone was heartbroken. Some people's faces were ashen. Lin Yu's identity and cultivation were deliberately hidden. Now, in the entire 10-square world, only the 3 palace masters knew about it. What virtue does a human have? Even if the 3 palace masters brought him here personally, I will still fight him to the death. Some of the male disciples who had a crush on Saintis Bai Yu were filled with grief and anger. They held their weapons and were about to rush into the room. "Thank you, Senior." Bai Yu stood up, tidied her clothes, and thanked him repeatedly. 2 more days, and the hidden danger will be eliminated, Lin Yu said slowly. "You can leave now." "Yes." Bai Yu was filled with joy. As she activated the cultivation method with all her might, her face flushed red. She stood up and left. When she opened the door, a group of male disciples had already surrounded the room. Their faces were filled with anger. "What are you doing?" Bai Yu returned to her cold personality. Saintis, did that evil bastard bully you? We are here to seek justice for you." Someone shouted loudly. Chapter 1142. When they saw the Saintess blush on her cheeks, they were even more certain of their thoughts and could not help but wail. "How dare you?" Only now did Bai Yu realize what these disciples were thinking. She angrily reprimanded them. "Senior, you're so righteous. You're just trying to treat the hidden injuries in my body. What are you thinking?" Bai Yu's face turned cold. At the same time, she realized that she had offended the senior. If such an expert was angered, they might not be able to survive. The 3 palace masters would not say anything even if the palace master wanted them to disappear with a flick of his finger. "Is that so?" Everyone was relieved to hear the scolding. However, there were still some disciples who were doubtful. "We've been rude. Saintess, I can see that your breathing is a little messy. You'd better rest more. Don't overwork yourself," a disciple said with concern. However, Saintess Bai Yu's expression changed when she thought of the purpose of the male disciples. "Don't worry about me. If you have the time, why don't you cultivate more?" Everyone left angrily after being scolded. After everyone left, Bai Yu's face flushed red. She apologized to the people in the room. "Senior, please don't take it to heart. I'll punish them later." Bai Yu left when there was no response from the room. However, she was in a good mood. After she left, a man beside her looked at her with hatred in his eyes. His name was Feng Ling, and he was the prospective saint of the Heavenly Island. He had long regarded Saintess Bai Yu as his exclusive property and did not allow anyone to get close to her. He had always been treated coldly by Bai Yu. He had never seen the holy daughter of Bai Yu acting like a little woman. He looked at the room and unconsciously revealed his killing intent. He left after a while. Lin Yu sat in the room with his legs crossed. He did not pay much attention to this matter, although he knew that he was being watched by someone. However, in his current perspective, it was just 1 or 2 mosquitoes flying around him. If they really provoked him, he would not mind killing them. Time passed quickly. On the second day, Bayou brought spiritual fruits and wine to Lin Yu's room. For hours later, he finally left. This caused some people to stare covetously and vigilantly at the room. Although they had all been severely punished yesterday, there were still some people who were unwilling to give up and were still hostile towards Lin Yu. Especially Feng Ling, the prospective holy son. His eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. As the candidate who was going to participate in the grand meeting, he had been sitting on countless resources for the past 1,000 years and was now in the Saint Realm. In Heavenly Island, their status was even more extraordinary. The Master of the Holy Land had even said that he would be appointed as the Holy Son in this grand meeting. This had never happened before in the history of Heavenly Island. Since the establishment of the Heavenly Island, there had never been any record of a saint. It could be seen how high Feng Ling's talent was. He believed that after becoming a saint, marrying Saintess Bayou would be a sure thing. But now he felt a strong sense of crisis, because Lin Yu gave him too much pressure. From the fact that the 3 palace masters had personally sent Lin Yu here, he knew how much they valued Lin Yu. Saintess Bayou is mine. No one can snatch her from me. Feng Ling's eyes were cold, causing the area around him to be covered in a layer of frost. This caused the disciples who were cultivating beside him to shiver. But after seeing Feng Ling's expression, they did not dare to say a word and could only retreat quickly. However, what he did not know was that although he had so many thoughts, Lin Yu did not take him seriously at all. He did not even look at him. On the third day, the hazy sunlight shone. Lin Yu was also personally invited by the Master of the Holy Land to the meeting hall. Saintess Bayou, who was about to break through to the Saint Realm, was also included. After Lin Yu and the others left, someone spoke up for Feng Ling. Why is that person invited, but the prospective holy son of Heavenly Island can't attend the meeting? This undoubtedly poked Feng Ling's sore spot. The Master of the Holy Land has his own reasons for making this arrangement. Focus on your cultivation. Feng Ling scolded coldly, then snorted coldly and went into seclusion. In the meeting hall, Bai Xiaoli also came out of seclusion. At this moment, his divine consciousness had become more condensed due to the cultivation in the mystic land. Just the power of his divine consciousness alone was enough to make people instinctively fearful. The 3 palace lords bowed deeply to Bai Xiaoli. This is the patriarch. Xiaoyu, pay your respects. The Master of the Holy Land looked serious. Saintess Bayou looked at Bai Xiaoli, who was in the divine consciousness state. Being under the pressure of the origin, she was incomparably shocked. The patriarch was one of the 10 great monster kings. She had only seen him in ancient books and on the stone pillar under Heavenly Island. Now that she saw him in person, her eyes were filled with sincerity. Greetings, patriarch. Bayou knelt on the ground with her hands on the ground. Her attitude was filled with respect and sincerity. For a cultivator, she wasn't considered very old. However, she had grown up on Heavenly Island. She yearned for the patriarch's deeds. At this moment, her expression was filled with excitement. Your talent is not bad. You may rise. Bai Xiaoli said slowly, you have finally done something that I'm satisfied with. As he said that, he did not forget to reprimand the Master of the Holy Land. The Master of the Holy Land could only nod awkwardly at the side. He did not dare to object. This Heavenly Island was built by other universes. Back then, Bai Xiaoli and that universe made use of each other. Bai Xiaoli used his own power to create the Fox Clan. Later, they gradually replaced the forces here. In general, the entire Fox Clan, which was the ruling class of Heavenly Island, was Bai Xiaoli's bloodline. Then, they began to discuss the grand event 5 years later. The Master of the Holy Land was the first to express his concern. Although we have the help of the 12 universe's divine kings, our top combat strength is still insufficient. If we really go to the grand event, we may not have a chance of winning. They had already received the news that this grand event was extremely important. There might be existences beyond the Divine King realm participating in it. This was extremely bad news for 10 Square World. After a long time of development and the consumption from the previous meetings, there were only a few Divine King experts left in the 10 Square World. 1,000,000 years ago, our master had the chance to break through to the ancestor realm. However, he was besieged by the other 3 holy lands. In the end, he died in the burial of heaven. At this point, the 3rd palace master's eyes were filled with murderous intent. That was because their master, in order to protect them, had brought up the rear by himself. In the end, he was killed. The burial of heaven was the place where the mysterious factor was born. If the 10 great holy lands were to be regarded as a string of pearls, then the burial of heaven would be in the middle of the pearls. It formed a mysterious zone that was hard to understand. After hearing the 3rd palace master's explanation, Bai Xiaoli said, "How dare they kill my juniors? If I let them go this time, can I still be one of the 10 great monster kings?" However, it was not appropriate for Bai Xiaoli to take action in this grand event. She immediately looked at Lin Yu. Lin Yu stood aside. Feeling Bai Xiaoli and the others' gazes, he could not help but be speechless. Lin Yu felt troubled. 1,000,000 years ago, the 3 holy lands had joined forces and killed the previous holy lord who was about to break through to the ancestor realm. Now that they were in this world, how terrifying would their cultivation base be? The 2nd palace master looked hesitant at this moment. The holy landlord looked at the 2nd palace master, indicating that she did not need to say anything. Bai Xiaoli's eyes were sharp. She immediately asked, "What suggestion do you have?" The 2nd palace master apologized to the holy landlord and stepped forward. "As far as I know, there is still an expert in 10 Square World. Although his cultivation is crippled, he is still in the over-god realm." Bai Xiaoli was surprised. "Where is he now?" "He is now in the 5 Elements continent. Juniors can find him with a token." The 2nd palace master's eyes were filled with sadness. She took out a bone token. Even now, it still carried the aura of the ancestor realm. The holy landlord sighed. However, he heard from the 2nd palace master that this expert's cultivation was crippled. Lin Yu also understood many things. In 10 Square World, the only thing that could pose a threat to the ancestor realm was the barrier left behind by Xiaoli. It must be the ancestor realm expert who had barged into Heavenly Island. Chapter 1143. However, this was a critical period. The Sacred Land Master sighed and finally revealed the truth. That ancestor realm expert came from one of the 12 universes. He's a human and was in love with 2nd junior sister. He even wanted to bring 2nd junior sister out of 10 Square World, but was stopped by Master. The Sacred Land Master looked at the 2nd Palace Master and said, "After Master passed away, that person barged into Heavenly Island and was crippled by us. Speaking of this, even the 2nd Palace Master who had broken through to the Divine King realm could not help but shed tears. Don't blame senior sister. When Master passed away, we were the only ones supporting 10 Square World. Otherwise, there would have been chaos." The Sacred Land Master's eyes were filled with pity. "I know," the 2nd Palace Master replied. Bai Xiaoli sighed. "If that's the case, go and find him. After this event, you can leave with him." "Old ancestor, really?" 2nd Palace Master's eyes were brimming with tears as he looked at Bai Xiaoli in disbelief. "Would I lie to you?" Bai Xiaoli said with a smile. After all, the Fox clan carried her bloodline. Although she needed to strengthen her forces, she still had feelings for them. She would not force the 2nd Palace Master to stay or leave. "Thank you, old ancestor." The 2nd Palace Master was grateful. "Right now, head to the 5 Elements continent and find that person. Then, while you're at it, find a corner of the technique I left behind and give it to this little child." Bai Xiaoli looked at Bai Yu. The Saintess Bai Yu's talent was amazing. Even Bai Xiaoli was moved by her. Obviously, she had high hopes for the Saintess Bai Yu. Then, Bai Xiaoli told Lin Yu the location and entered the secret place again to recuperate. This time, the Sacred Land Master needed to stay on Heavenly Island to take charge of the situation. This time, only Lin Yu, the 2nd Palace Master, and the Saintess Bai Yu were going to the 5 Elements continent. The few of them stepped into the teleportation formation. Then, a huge spatial fluctuation hit, and the 3 of them disappeared from the Heavenly Tao. The 5 Elements continent. All that could be seen was desolation. It was hard to imagine what kind of war happened in the past to turn a world into such a state. There were no signs of life in this place at all. Even the plants here had withered old roots. The glory chi was also very thin. According to the Lord of the Holy Land, there were still humans living here. This way, the second palace master pointed to the west. The sky and earth were gray and hazy. There was only a thin light at the end of the horizon. Lin Yu nodded and followed closely behind the second palace master. As the three of them quickly moved forward, there were gradually some plants that took root in the barren land, until a muddy river flowed through the canyon. The ravine emitted an aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. Standing high up in the air, one could tell that this ravine was actually an enormous sword scar. It was unknown how far it stretched, but seemed to have reached the end of the horizon. At the bottom of the canyon, beside the river, there were signs of life. Not far away, there was a small town. Due to the lack of vegetation, the entire town was made of stone. There were no defensive structures around the perimeter. That was because there were simply too few living beings in this place. It was practically impossible to find them in the entire land. Lin Yu and the other two arrived at the small town. They could not help but frown, especially Bai Yu, looking at the groups of emaciated humans, some of whom were only skin and bones. She could not help but feel sympathy for them. For a saintess who lived on Sky Island, the scene in front of her had completely overturned her understanding of the world. In fact, there were places in the entire lower 5 elements mainland that were far more difficult than this place. Bai Yu could not bear to see them like this. She distributed the only dry food she had to everyone. However, this little bit of food was insignificant for a small town. In the end, Lin Yu also took out some spiritual fruits and distributed them to the humans in the small town. Immortals have descended to the mortal world. Living immortals. The humans here held the food in their hands and were all very grateful. However, when the strong men who had gone out to hunt returned and saw this scene, their eyes turned cold. "Are you guys from the 5 elements mainland?" The leader of the group, a young man with a decent cultivation, asked. "Yes, what's wrong?" Bai Yu asked in confusion. They were kind enough to distribute food to the humans in the small town. Why were they treated so coldly by this group of people with cultivation? Bai Yu could not understand. "I'm sorry, we don't need your charity here. Please leave." The young man stood out. He did not give Bai Yu any face and directly asked them to leave. "We are kind enough to distribute food. Why are you showing such an attitude when you're grateful?" Bai Yu was angry. To the young man, it was just a matter of a slap. However, they were here to do something. Bai Yu could not bear to kill someone who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. Moreover, the young man seemed to be the leader of the hunting team in the small town and had the highest cultivation. If he died, many people in the small town would starve to death because of the lack of food. As the young man spoke, these humans took out all the food that was still alive and wanted to return it to Bai Yu and the rest, although their eyes were filled with desire. However, after hearing that they were from the upper 5 elements mainland, their attitude turned cold. "I'm not from the upper 5 elements mainland," Lin Yu said calmly. "I'm from another world." Lin Yu looked at the young man at the same time. It was rare to be able to cultivate to the samsara realm in a continent where the glory chi was so thin and his combat body was also at the same level. The young man looked at Lin Yu. Although his cultivation was not high, he could still tell that Lin Yu was from the human race. "You are from the human race. Come in and have a cup of tea. As for these two, please leave," the young man said. He was only being courteous to Bai Yu and her brother on account of Lin Yu. "How dare you? Do you know who we are?" Bai Yu was furious. She had never been treated like this since she was a child. However, when she was about to step forward, a terrifying aura came from the small town. She could vaguely see a broken long sword in the middle of the town. The white cloth on the sword hilt was stained with blood and was fluttering in the wind. It was the aura of the long sword that even Lin Yu felt threatened. When the second palace master saw the long sword, he gradually became agitated and tears welled up in his eyes. He muttered softly, "You are here. Why don't you come out to see me?" The sword's power was still there, and the aura of the progenitor realm was emitted. Even the second palace master could not force his way in. "Wait for me here," Lin Yu said to Bai Yu and the young man. Then, he followed the young man and the others into the small town. The entire small town had a population of less than 100. At this moment, they were all following behind the young man and the others. Their eyes glowed with greed when they saw the beast carcasses carried by the hunters. They could resist the food of Bai Yu and the others, but they were drooling when they saw the carcasses of the beasts. They were starving and had only eaten one meal in 3 days. Many children had even run out of the small town to dig up tree roots and chew on them to satisfy their hunger. Lin Yu looked at the miserable state of the small town. Most of the humans here were ordinary people without cultivation. It was not easy to survive in such an environment. At this moment, a drunken, slovenly, and shabbily dressed old man appeared in front of him. He held a wine pot in his hand and poured a mouthful of wine into his mouth from time to time. "Master," the young man stepped forward and half knelt on the ground. However, the old man only cared about drinking wine and did not pay attention to the young man. The young man was not embarrassed and just scratched his head. The most important thing now was to distribute meat for the humans in the small town, with the population as the base. Lier's family, 3 people. Lier's family, the knife in the young man's hand paused. When he saw the sadness on Lier's face, he did not say anything. It seemed that the youngest son of Lier's family did not make it. Not long ago, the fields of the small town were damaged by the sudden flood, and there was no harvest. Now, with the help of the young people, they went out to hunt. If they were lucky, they could get food. Many of the residents of the small town did not make it through this period. The slovenly old man on the side was a little crazy. However, as Lin Yu looked over, he was sure that this was the person the second palace master was looking for. Chapter 1144. The slovenly old man naturally noticed Lin Yu as well. However, he only glanced at him casually before leaving. It seemed like he was not interested in Lin Yu at all. Moreover, there were no ripples of cultivation on him at all. He was just like an ordinary person. Lin Yu could not help but feel suspicious. His divine consciousness was very powerful. According to the second palace master, even if this person's cultivation was destroyed, he would still be an overgod. Therefore, he should not be acting like this. As the food was distributed, today's hunting was quite bountiful. The young man invited Lin Yu to stay in the town for a meal with the townspeople. Although Lin Yu had already reached the state of anedia, it was not good for him to refuse their kind invitation. Therefore, he stayed there. However, his target had always been the slovenly old man. As night fell, a bonfire rose in the center of the town. All the residents of the small town had gathered in the bright light of the fire. There were a few large pots in the center. Women and children were cutting the remaining beast meat in an orderly manner and adding some wild vegetables that they had picked. This was already the best meal that the townspeople had been able to have in a long time. This was because of the sudden disaster. There was also wine brewed from wild fruits among the townspeople. Today, all of them were taken out. As the steaming stew was served, Lin Yu did not mind at all. He directly raised the wine bowl in his hand and gestured. As time went by, after 3 rounds of wine, the townspeople who did not drink often were already red in the face. They were drunk and boasting. Some children also drank secretly and were swaying left and right. Lin Yu naturally took out his precious wine. However, the power was too spiritual. These ordinary people could not bear it at all. After Lin Yu diluted it with water, he let everyone have a taste. Although it was diluted, it was still full of spiritual energy. Those who drank it felt comfortable all over. I didn't expect that you would have such a true temperament when you're together with those high and mighty people from the 5 Symbols continent. The young man was also drunk at this moment. He sat beside Lin Yu and laughed loudly. The sacred land of the 5 Symbols continent has pushed us humans out. We live in a desolate continent with great difficulty. We disdain to associate ourselves with them. It was my fault for being rude to you just now. The young man apologized. Lin Yu shook his head gently. It's fine. As he spoke, the young man raised his bowl again and took a big gulp. However, because he had drunk too much spirit wine and had been out hunting for 3 days, he had barely rested. After a few bowls of wine, he fell to the ground and fell asleep. The young man had lost his parents when he was young. It was only with the help of the villagers that he was able to grow up. He grew up eating the food of the villagers. Then, under the guidance of the sloppy old man, he stepped onto the path of cultivation. Therefore, when the town was in danger, he risked his life many times to go to the outside world to hunt powerful beasts. It was as if he had single-handedly saved the entire town from disaster. Lin Yu also admired the young man's behavior. When everyone went to rest, Lin Yu sat cross-legged beside the fire that was about to be extinguished. At this moment, the sloppy old man finally arrived. He picked up the stewed meat that the young man had specially left for him and ate heartily with the wine. "Senior, someone wants to see you." Lin Yu placed his hands on his knees and said indifferently. However, the sloppy old man ignored him and continued eating the stewed meat. Seeing that the sloppy old man did not reply, after a long time, the sloppy old man finished the wine in his hand. However, he was clearly not satisfied as he searched for more wine in the empty wine jar beside the fire. However, he did not find anything. He could not help but feel vexed. Lin Yu took out the spirit wine and handed it to the sloppy old man. The sloppy old man took a glance. After smelling the fragrance of the wine, he did not reject it and received it directly. Late at night, the sloppy old man had already drunk a few jars of spirit wine. However, he still felt like he had not had enough. Lin Yu was not in a hurry. Instead, he sat opposite the sloppy old man. When the fire was completely extinguished, only a few sparks were left. The sky was pitch black. Even though the weather was clear, there were no stars in sight. At this moment, the sloppy old man let out a sigh. "It's all over now. Let her go. To tell you the truth, we need your help for the grand occasion." Lin Yu did not try to hide the truth. "I see." The sloppy old man seemed to be mocking himself. However, he rose from his seat and waved his hand. "I've lost my will to compete. Besides, as you can see, I don't have any cultivation." "You're running away," Lin Yu calmly said. The sloppy old man shuddered hearing this. Lin Yu stared at the old man in the dark. After a long time, the old man's body emitted a power that made people's hearts palpitate. Even though his body was crooked now, he still carried a disdainful aura that looked down on the world and swept through the 9 heavens. "I've never been weaker than anyone in my life. I hate being looked down upon." The old man turned around like a sword immortal. His eyes shone like a sword immortal. "If that's the case, as long as you can defeat me, I'll agree to your request." The old man's hunched back gradually straightened. He placed one hand behind his back and clenched his right fist. The broken sword that stood in the middle of the town trembled. Then, it appeared in the old man's hand with a clang. Even though there was still no cultivation, Lin Yu's gaze turned solemn. Lin Yu did not show any fear. Instead, he rose to his feet. The emperor's sword appeared in his hand. Both of them did not unleash their cultivation. However, their aura split the sky. Even the second palace master and Baiyu who were outside could sense it. "What happened? Are they going to fight?" "You're not from 10 Square World." The old man could tell. "You're not simple. Why do you have the aura of my universe?" Lin Yu was surprised to hear the old man's words. He knew that the old man came from another universe. However, he did not expect the old man to be familiar with his aura. The old man definitely did not come from the 12 universes. The time did not match. There was only one possibility. The old man sensed the aura of Earth on him. In other words, the old man came from the universe where Earth was. "Lin Yu, please enlighten me." Lin Yu cupped his hands slightly. "Lu Dongbin." The old man returned the salute indifferently. When the old man said his name, Lin Yu's heart, which had not changed for many years, was slightly moved. The immortal god on Earth, the sword immortal called Ancestor Lu Dongbin. He was a mythical figure on Earth. Lin Yu did not want to meet him in this way. However, Lin Yu did not show any surprise. Now that he met the immortal god of Earth, Lin Yu believed that he still had a chance to return to Earth. Both of them did not show their cultivation. Instead, they were purely competing with their sword skills. Lin Yu's attainments in sword skills had reached a very deep level during the 100,000 years of reincarnation. However, he was at a disadvantage just after exchanging blows with Lu Dongbin. Ancestor Lu, who is known as the Sword Immortal, had the power to turn something rotten into something magical. It was mysterious and unfathomable. Lin Yu took 2 steps back and felt his arm go numb. The two of them did not use their cultivation, and Lin Yu's Divine King Realm physical body was extremely powerful. However, an ordinary attack from Lin Yu had caused his blood to boil. However, Lin Yu was not discouraged. He held the Emperor's sword in his hand and stepped forward again. As the 2 swords continued to exchange blows, the sound of gold and jade could be heard. Pure Yang swordsmanship? Lin Yu said at this time. You actually know me. Lu Dongbin was slightly surprised. I am very curious about you. Lu Dongbin's heart, which had been dead silent for a long time, was stirred up. Then he directly inserted the broken long sword diagonally into the ground. I can go with you. After 2 hours of fighting, Lu Dongbin stopped and said slowly, Senior, thank you for your mercy. Lin Yu responded politely. Lu Dongbin gave Lin Yu a meaningful look. Let's go and meet the second palace master. Lu Dongbin's eyes flashed with a trace of sadness as he said. Then, the two of them walked out of the town. Chapter 1145. The second palace master had been waiting for a long time, standing at the entrance of the town. Her eyes were filled with hope. She and Lu Dongbin had left behind too many regrets. Then, he saw 2 figures slowly walking out of the dark town. A smile appeared in the second palace master's eyes. That smile was so dazzling in the dark night, as bright as the sun. They had been separated for 1,000,000 years, but now that they had met again, everything was no longer the same. You're finally willing to come out to see me. The second palace master cried tears of joy. Lu Dongbin's lazy eyes finally revealed a trace of emotion. At this time, his figure was no longer hunched, but incomparably tall and straight, like an ancient pine tree, standing in the same place. Long time no see, Ixan. Lu Dongbin's voice was filled with bitterness. I'm sorry. The tears in the second palace master's eyes were moving, making one feel pity for her. Lu Dongbin stepped forward and tucked a strand of the second palace master's hair behind her ear. You've changed in 1,000,000 years. The second palace master's eyes were filled with sadness. She caressed Lu Dongbin's weathered face. I still remember how high-spirited you were 1,000,000 years ago, moving unhindered between heaven and earth, riding on the sword and riding the wind, so carefree. Everything in the world will change. Lu Dongbin said slowly. Lin Yu and Bai Yu watched quietly from the side, not saying a word, until the next morning. Ancestor has agreed. After this grand event, I can leave with you. The second palace master finally said slowly. Don't you care that I'm already a cripple? Lu Dongbin asked. Even if you're an ordinary person, or if you're missing an arm or a leg, in the end, I won't leave you. The second palace master's eyes were filled with tears. However, I have a condition for this grand event. Lu Dongbin spoke again. That is to bring the human race here to the 5-symbol continent. Are you willing? Lu Dongbin had come to the 5-symbol continent 1,000,000 years ago after the Sky Island was defeated. He saw that the human race lived in an abyss of suffering. Although he did not interfere too much, after being together for so long, he already had feelings for the human race here. Now that Ancestor has returned and Senior Sister has been reprimanded, there's naturally no problem. The second palace master said. After seeing Lu Dongbin, the smile on her face never disappeared. At this moment, he naturally agreed to Lu Dongbin's small request. Although Lu Dongbin was still dressed in sloppy clothes, he already had the demeanor of a peerless sword immortal. The sky had already brightened. Between heaven and earth, there was already a radiance that enveloped everything. Dew had formed on the stones of this barren land. At this time, the townspeople had already woken up. The young man also woke up early. After cultivating for 2 hours, he quickly packed up his equipment and prepared to start a new round of hunting. This was because for the hundreds of people in the small town, it was only a matter of 1 or 2 meals. Since he couldn't make ends meet, he had to enter the danger zone again with his companions to hunt beasts. This was bound to be extremely dangerous. Over the past few days, the team led by the young man had shrunk from 20 people to 7 people. Although the young man's cultivation could be considered to be at the top of this land, he was still no match for some beasts. Most of the time, it was hard for him to take care of his companions. He had suggested many times that he should go out alone. However, none of the town's residents agreed. They had watched the young man grow up. How could they let him take the risk alone? Master, the young man was in the small courtyard. His upper body was bare, revealing his vigorous posture as he prepared to take a shower. He saw Lu Dongbin and Lin Yu slowly walking towards him. Moreover, he saw that his master's condition seemed to be different. His posture was no longer stooped, and his behavior was no longer crazy. The broken longsword in the middle of the town was now in Lu Dongbin's hand again. Master, you've recovered? The young man knelt on the ground, his face filled with joy. This was because he had heard from the old people in the town that his master was definitely not an ordinary person. He was an old man of the great-grandfather generation. In his childhood, Lu Dongbin had always been like this. Later on, the young man received occasional guidance from Lu Dongbin. He was very talented and actually found his own cultivation path. You've done well. Lu Dongbin was very satisfied with his only disciple. Now, I'll give you a person. Gather all the humans in this land and send them to the 5-elephant continent. Lu Dongbin said. Then he placed his finger on the young man's forehead, and a stream of information flowed into his mind. Among the information was the location of all the humans in the 5-elephant continent. At the same time, he also passed on his mantle to the young man. The mysterious information was constantly digested in the young man's mind. More than 2 hours passed. The young man came back to his senses. There was no doubt that Lu Dongbin's inheritance had opened his eyes to a wider world. Such great kindness made the young man kneel on the ground and kowtow 3 times. Thank you for passing on your teachings, Master, the young man said firmly. Lu Dongbin nodded his head in satisfaction. Then, he handed the token to the 5-elephant continent to the young man. I still have things to do, so I'll leave for a while. See you on the 5-elephant continent. I'll see your progress. After saying that, Lu Dongbin and the young man did not stay any longer. They turned into 2 streams of light and flew into the sky amidst the exclamations of the town's residents. Then, the 4 of them arrived at the east side of the 5-elephant continent. There were volcanoes that were constantly erupting. The ground below was filled with boiling magma. The scorching aura made by you, who had a lower cultivation, feel her heart palpitate. Even the cultivation in her body showed signs of being destroyed. Lu Dongbin flew on his sword. His body emitted a protective barrier that protected by you and the second palace master. Although his cultivation had not fully recovered, his progenitor's Tao laws were still present. He was far more powerful than an overgod. It was hard to imagine how powerful Lu Dongbin had been 1,000,000 years ago before his cultivation had been destroyed by the barrier. Back then, he might have truly been able to ride on his sword and travel freely between heaven and earth. When Lin Yu was on earth, he had also read some ancient books. Among them, the records of sword immortal Lu Dongbin described him as free and unfettered. Lin Yu had been fascinated by this for a long time. Now that he had seen the real person, the impression in his mind had deepened significantly. An endless chain of volcanoes stood under the sky, looking extremely majestic and magnificent. Lin Yu headed straight for the depths according to the location given by Xiaoli. The deeper they went, the more intense the aura became. In the end, Lin Yu had no choice but to borrow the power of the God King's badge to advance. In the end, the few of them stopped at the mouth of a volcano that was spewing black magma. This is the place. This is the fortune left behind by your patriarch. Lin Yu pointed in the direction. If by you, the second palace master, and the others were here, they might not be able to reach it. Now, this world belongs to you young people. You can lead her in. Lu Dongbin's eyes were smiling. The second palace master also agreed. Lin Yu did not care about the details. He nodded, follow me in. With that, he led Bai Yu to his side. Without any hesitation, he emitted the power of the God King's badge and entered directly. When the two entered the mouth of the volcano, it was just a small wave. This kid is full of mysteries. I can't see through him. After Lin Yu and Bai Yu entered, Lu Dongbin slowly opened his mouth. As a true god, he can suppress Senior's sister. He's not simple. He comes from the 12 universes and is the current ruler of the 12 universes. The second palace master said slowly, "How good would it be if this person grew up in the 10-direction world? From the 12 universes?" Lu Dongbin's eyes were filled with contemplation. He always felt that there was a familiar aura on Lin Yu, but too much time had passed, and he could not remember it clearly. Therefore, Lu Dongbin's heart was filled with uncertainty. Inside the volcano, the scorching temperature caused Bai Yu, who was close to Lin Yu, to feel extremely hot. Even her neck had turned pink, and her breathing had become rapid. "Calm down," Lin Yu spoke. There were traces of Tao in his voice. Soon, the scorching heat in Bai Yu's body was suppressed. The aura of this volcano was extremely terrifying. Even Lin Yu, who used the God King's badge, could feel the scorching temperature as they went deeper. Chapter 1146. Lin Yu could feel the glory chi in his body getting more and more agitated. In the end, he could no longer control it. A ray of light appeared in front of him. Under this ray of light, Bai Yu was almost completely lost. Now, her slim figure was like a water snake, climbing onto Lin Yu's neck and sucking greedily. Lin Yu frowned slightly. He could not throw Bai Yu out now. Without the protection of the King of God's order, Bai Yu might turn into ashes immediately. Lin Yu had a strong heart and would not be moved by women's charms and temptations. At the same time, he sighed his heart. Bai Xiaoli is indeed a nine-tailed celestial fox. She indeed has a natural charm. Even in this trap, she can't escape. Lin Yu started to circulate his cultivation with all his might. Half an hour later, Lin Yu crashed into the barrier, and the surrounding air gradually cooled down. It was a long time later that Bai Yu woke up. Just now. After Bai Yu woke up, she recalled the scene that she had just posted. The scene was too charming and gentle, causing her face to blush instantly. It was like a ripe apple, tender and alluring. However, she quickly recovered and apologized. "Senior, it was an unintentional act. I hope you don't mind." "It's fine," Lin Yu replied indifferently. Then, he began to observe the surrounding space. This place seemed to be the deepest part of the volcano, which was the bottom. Because of the special barrier, the scorching aura of the black lava could no longer be felt here. Instead, it was replaced by a cold aura. This was a huge tunnel. Among them, there seemed to be collapsed pillars and rubble. It seemed like this was a ruin. Later on, it was destroyed for unknown reasons. But for some reason, it appeared in the deepest part of the volcano. "The fortune that your old ancestor gave you should be right in front," Lin Yu said indifferently. Then, he guided Bai Yu forward. After the two of them confirmed that this place was safe, they took a step forward and headed forward. In the tunnel, more and more ruins appeared, and there were also skeletons of unknown living beings. Bai Yu had a worried look on her face as she looked around vigilantly. It was as if an unimaginable battle had taken place here. Lin Yu even sensed the aura of the progenitor realm from one of the sword scars. He couldn't help but wonder if the fortune here had already been obtained by someone else. Before Bai Xiaoli left behind the good fortune, this place was already like this. Because Bai Xiaoli had gone into seclusion in such a hurry, she had not told him anything. She had only left him the exact coordinates. However, the deeper they went, the more complete the remnants became. An ancient aura emerged from the murals on both sides of the passageway. It was a desolate and primitive scene with unknown creatures carved on it. He was indomitable, and his figure was like a mountain. He had the power to carry mountains and split seas. With a raise of his hand, he shattered the chaos. Could this be the Khanate god fiends that appeared at the birth of the universe? Lin Yu's eyes were filled with suspicion. However, Bai Yu had no idea what Lin Yu was looking at. That was because the murals she saw were shrouded in a layer of chaos. She could not see through them. Perhaps it was because her cultivation was too low. Bai Yu was puzzled by Lin Yu's stop. "Senior, were the engravings on them?" Lin Yu did not hide anything from Baiyu's question. They should be recording the scenes of the birth of the universe. As he moved forward, the scenes also changed. Gradually, ancient ancestors appeared on the murals. They were offering sacrifices to heaven and earth as they wandered through the primitive mountains and rivers. There were also prophets among the ancestors who had already sensed the energy and matter between heaven and earth. In this primitive era, it seems that the obsidian chi is very different from today's. Lin Yu could clearly sense the changes in the scenes on the murals. It was as if his spiritual will was already in these murals. This was of great benefit to Lin Yu's cultivation. Therefore, he was very serious about comprehending it. This was because it involved the origin of the universe, and the progenitor realm was to sense the heavenly Tao and then fuse with it. This required a cultivator to have a deep understanding and comprehension of the origin of the universe. Seeing Lin Yu stop, Baiyu did not urge or disturb him. Instead, she stood obediently at the side. She was waiting for Lin Yu to wake up. At this moment, she subconsciously looked at Lin Yu's chiseled face and recalled the charming scene just now. She couldn't help but blush again. She was beautiful to begin with. Her neck was long and slender, and her eyes were bright and beautiful. She carried a unique charm of the fox race. Now, she looked shy, as if she had walked out of a painting. As time passed, Lin Yu gained some insights from the murals of the ancient ancestors. Although the world has changed now, as long as I am firm, it is not impossible to attain the Tao. Lin Yu made up his mind. His Tao was different to begin with. Lin Yu did not want to be affected by the great Tao of heaven and earth in the future. Instead, he wanted to control his own destiny and jump out of it. Now that he had seen the ancient god fiends and witnessed the changes in the environment of the ancient ancestors, he was even more firm in his thoughts. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes, which flashed with a deep light. Let's continue forward, Lin Yu said. At this point, the passage seemed to have been cut off by someone. The scenes behind had become unknown. This seemed to involve an extremely deep secret. Some living beings did not want this ancient history to be exposed to the future generations. Lin Yu only saw blood flowing and despair in the last scene. Only half of a majestic and boundless figure was left. The murals after that were no longer there. After looking at it for a long time, Lin Yu no longer felt conflicted, because the truth of the universe might not be something that he could grasp yet. When his strength increased, the truth of history would gradually surface and be known by him. After all, he still had the 10 monster kings by his side. These old monsters who had been born for countless years. He could find them to understand the secrets in the future. Not long after, they arrived at the end of the passage. There were 10 broken statues among them. An aura that made one's heart palpitate instantly spread out. Although they were no longer able to determine exactly what sort of living being was inside, the aura they emitted was enough to cause one to involuntarily kneel before it. They wanted to worship them. Baiyu could not withstand the aura and was about to kneel down. One of the broken statues sensed Baiyu's aura and emitted a faint light. In an instant, it triggered a change in Baiyu's body. The statue was broken. Some heads and bodies had collapsed to the side. Even so, Lin Yu still felt that he was facing an endless universe. A sense of awe rose in his heart. As for the relatively well-preserved statues, he could only vaguely distinguish their characteristics. Chapter 1147. It was the statue that was emitting the light at this moment. There were countless tales behind it, but now there was only one left. Lin Yu had already guessed that the statues here were the 10 great monster kings. There were still bits of faith power flowing on the statue. This was also the reason why, after such a long time, the statue still existed. At this moment, Baiyu seemed to have lost her consciousness. At this moment, her body was slowly floating in the void uncontrollably. Under the guidance of the light, she went to the front of the statue. When Baiyu's body appeared in front of the statue, she realized how majestic the statue was. It was more than tens of thousands of feet tall. If it wasn't broken, she might not be able to see the top. At this moment, the last remaining tail of Baishaoli's statue emitted a mysterious power filled with Tao rhymes. Lin Yu knew that this was the good fortune that Bai Xiaoli was talking about. Seeing that Bai Yu had already begun to accept the creation, Lin Yu also sat down cross-legged. Now, in this space, only Bai Xiaoli's statue had undergone a change. And as Bai Yu's ancestor, there shouldn't be any danger. The only possibility was the test before accepting the creation. This was the inheritance of the nine-tailed fox race, and Lin Yu couldn't participate. He simply watched as the aura around Bai Yu gradually calmed down. He also began to cultivate. He recalled the scene in the murals and began to ponder. And just as Lin Yu was comprehending the Tao, in the passage, there seemed to be some kind of power being drawn. It was very primitive. Roar. A dull roar seemed to have traveled through time and space and appeared in the passage. A primitive power swept out from the passageway. Lin Yu suddenly opened his eyes. His figure disappeared on the spot in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already in the passage. The murals seemed to have come to life. Among them, there were innate god fiends and ancient ancestors trying to break free. And the direction they were locked on was the end of the passage, where the statues of the 10 great monster kings were. Behave yourselves, Lin Yu said indifferently. The aura of the godly king realm spread out and enveloped all the murals. Those innate god fiends and ancient ancestors who wanted to break free from the murals were suppressed again under Lin Yu's aura. However, Lin Yu didn't show the slightest bit of joy, because he sensed that an even more powerful existence was about to come to the present world with the help of the murals. This made Lin Yu couldn't help but frown. Who exactly carved these murals? There seemed to be a river of time slowly appearing on them. They wanted to bring the living beings from ancient times to the present world, just as Lin Yu was about to suppress all the creatures back into the mural again. It godly, 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 godly. The terrifying power of time spread throughout the entire passage. There was a feeling of being torn apart. In the end, the river of time appeared and loomed over the entire passage. The chaos chi began to spread and encapsulated Lin Yu's figure. Under the dense chaos chi, Lin Yu's figure seemed to have suddenly arrived at the end of the universe. He stood on a long river of time that had already collapsed. He looked down at the rising waves with the posture of a superior. Lin Yu knew that in the long river of time, every wave represented a period of history. At this moment, Lin Yu's body suddenly descended towards the river of time uncontrollably. Lin Yu knew that this was the result of the confrontation between the godly king's decree and the murals. The origin of the God King's medallion was very mysterious. Although the old God King did not mention its origin after leaving behind the God King's medallion. However, now that Lin Yu had broken through to God King, he found the God King badge to be more and more mysterious. The God King's medallion must have a great background. While Lin Yu was pondering, he had already appeared in an unknown era. He saw half a broken sun standing between the vast heavens and earth. He was currently at the edge of the heavens and earth of this era, which was like the peak of a mountain. We've been waiting for you. Behind him were 5 people sitting with their legs crossed, as if they had been waiting for Lin Yu's arrival. Lin Yu calmly turned around. The 5 powerful figures were a little illusionary, but their cultivation was undoubtedly very strong. They gave off an unbeatable feeling. Lin Yu sensed a familiar aura from the living beings. They were one of the living beings that he had tried to stop from breaking free from the murals. This era is called Desolation. They did not mention their names. Instead, they mentioned the name of this era. This era is after the ancient gods have perished and before all living beings have awakened. Another living being emitting a fiery glow spoke again. Successor, I wonder if the ancient gods of the later era have awakened? The living being in the green light asked. As his aura spread out, it was filled with endless vitality. One could see the ancient trees around him constantly, as if they had experienced reincarnation. After withering, they would be reborn. Lin Yu calmly looked at the phantoms of the 5 creatures and faintly shook his head. No, is that so? Then it seems that the new reincarnation has not begun. Another living being nodded with a look of realization. Lin, you had already sensed from the bodies of the powerful living beings that the river of time here did not seem to be the real river of time that was deeply involved in the entire universe. It seemed to have been created by someone. Although it was an era that truly appeared in ancient history, it was just a copy. It was also because of this that the five powerful living beings were so illusionary. One could not even see their faces clearly. Seems like you've guessed it. One of the living beings laughed heartily. We have already passed away. It's just that a big shot cut off this era and left our figures here. Lin Yu listened to their narration and could not help but wonder what kind of person would have such means. That living being seemed to have seen through Lin Yu's thoughts. That person is beyond imagination. He seems to have escaped from the five elements and is no longer in the universe. However, speaking of which, he has an indescribable relationship with the artifact that you have. When the living being mentioned this matter, suddenly, primal chaos, heavenly lightning gathered in the sky. This seemed to have become some kind of taboo. That person could not be mentioned. The living being looked at the chaotic, heavenly lightning in the sky and could not help but laugh. That's all I can tell you. Since you have stopped me from coming to this world, this is a huge karma that needs to be settled. One of the living beings said, and a bright battle intent burst out from his eyes. Fourth brother is still so battle-hungry, the living being in the center said, slowly with a smile. Chapter 1148. Lin Yu knew that this battle was unavoidable. Right now, the King of God's order was clashing with the murals. Within a short period of time, he wouldn't be able to escape from the river of time created by this forbidden figure. Right now, the five living beings were all showing their battle intent. The river of time couldn't be touched. It represented great karma, even if it was created by someone. However, the power it possessed was no different from the real river of time. Lin Yu didn't show any fear. He looked at the five figures. He also wanted to verify what level his cultivation was at compared to the previous generations of geniuses in history. Let me go first. The living being that was surrounded by flames stood up at this moment. A powerful force swept out. It burned all the white clouds in the world. Lin Yu released his aura at the same time. Without a doubt, this living being that was emitting flames was extremely powerful. It was just that he had deliberately suppressed it to the level of a master god. Even so, his aura was enough to look down on the world. It gave off a feeling that he was invincible since ancient times. Lin Yu took a step forward. Their gazes met. Even the space showed signs of instability. Chaotic divine lightning kept bursting out as the two of them exchanged glances. Right now, the world was trembling as if it couldn't withstand the power of the two. At this moment, the remaining four living beings emitted their auras and completely stabilized the space around them. They didn't attack together. Although it was said that they were asking for enormous karma, it seemed that they were more interested in verifying the strength of Lin Yu, the person who had come later. Lin Yu also understood their intentions. Then, he would do as they wished. A battle that transcended the river of time. Use your full strength. Otherwise, you won't be able to return to reality alive. The being in the fiery light slowly spoke. There was a destructive aura in the flames. He wasn't joking. As one of the five most powerful people in this era, although he had suppressed his realm, he definitely had the right to say this. Thank you for the reminder. Lin Yu nodded. He unleashed all his power. The aura of a peak true god was revealed without a doubt. This terrifying aura swept out. It even gave off the feeling that it was even stronger than that of ordinary lords. The two of them didn't say anything else. At the same time, the two fists collided. Boom! Under the impact of their physical bodies, pitch-black cracks appeared in the space. The two of them retreated 2 steps at the same time. Great craftsmanship doesn't work. None of them used their own abilities or techniques. Instead, he used his body to fight. Not long after, the two of them had already exchanged countless blows. At that moment, the two of them simultaneously retreated 300 meters and wiped the blood from the corners of their mouths at the same time. From the living being's eyes, one could tell that he was currently in a state of excitement. I have dominated this era and polished every cultivation level to perfection. I never thought that you would be this strong, too. Next, the fiery creature stepped forward, leaving behind a trail of destructive flames. I acknowledge you as an opponent. He charged out once again. He clenched his fist and attacked Lin Yu. Lin Yu cultivated both his battle physique and divine will. In the 12 universes, he was one of the few people who had embarked on this path to the Divine King realm since ancient times. At that moment, he wasn't afraid, even in the face of a hero from ancient history. He didn't back off at all. He used his physical body to fight. Boom! Heaven and Earth's pole. Although it was protected by the auras of the four of them, a large area of the mountain peak was collapsing. Huge rocks like towering mountains fell from the edge of Heaven and Earth's pole to the ground below, creating a huge commotion. It was like a huge meteorite falling from the sky to the ground. It caused an incomparable earthquake. The two of them fought for an unknown period of time. However, both of them were injured. Lin Yu's shoulder was almost shattered. Meanwhile, the fiery creature's abdomen was bleeding. Lin Yu's fist had almost pierced through it. Lin Yu's right arm hung limply to the side. He had lost all feeling in it. However, the two of them had no intention of stopping. Even though they were panting heavily and were at the end of their tether, their attacks were still boundlessly terrifying and contained great power. One punch was enough to shatter a star. Both of them were exhausted. However, they didn't use any techniques. Seizing the opportunity, the fiery creature clenched his fist and attacked Lin Yu's head. Everything happened too suddenly, just when the four of them thought Lin Yu was about to lose. The corners of Lin Yu's mouth curled into a smile. The fiery creature sensed that something was wrong and wanted to withdraw his fist and attack with his palm. However, Lin Yu abruptly turned and unleashed a terrifying speed. Right now, the two of them were already completely exhausted. Their speed left the other four living beings in disbelief. This latecomer has been holding back all this time. At that moment, the leading creature saw through the battle and spoke slowly. At that moment, he waved his right hand and repelled the fiery creature's fist. Then his right leg came down from the sky like a blade. He wanted to force the fiery creature to retreat. Both of them had their own pride. Since the beginning of the battle, they had always fought head-on. If the fiery creature retreated now, it would mean that it was showing signs of cowardice in this battle. It would also mean that it had lost its invincibility when it came to the level of its physical body. Impossible, the fiery creature shouted. Facing Lin Yu's descending right leg that was like a heavenly blade. He actually shouted loudly as he charged forward. Fourth brother is stubborn like this. At that moment, the four of them were ready to save the fiery creature. Even though he knew that he was going to lose, the fiery creature didn't give up and wanted to make one last attempt. However, he would undoubtedly have to pay a terrible price for doing so, although it was a battle of physical strength. However, this single strike was enough to shatter stars one after another. If the fiery creature was hit, its physical body would most likely explode as a result. At the critical moment, Lin Yu withdrew 70% of his strength. Even so, his strength was still terrifying. The fiery creature was directly pressed to the ground and spat out blood. He no longer had the strength to fight. The scene was silent for a while. Then, the fiery creature stood up and cupped his hands. I lost. Thank you for holding back. Lin Yu returned the gesture and said humbly, if it was just a battle of physical strength, I might not be a match for you if you used your divine powers. However, Lin Yu had consumed a lot of energy in this battle. At that moment, his physical body was almost cracked. It was clear how powerful the fiery creature was. Rest for a while and recover from your injuries. It's my turn next. At that moment, the creature walked out of the green light. He was calm and natural, as if nothing in the world could move him. Chapter 1149. Thank you, Lin Yu said calmly, his body covered in blood. Then, he sat down on the ground without hesitation. Pure Yao Qi flowed around his body, and a powerful blood Qi circled around him like a true dragon. It was almost tangible. The latecomer's body and divine will are very strong. It's not surprising that fourth brother lost to him. The man in the lead analyzed. However, second brother's Tao technique is extraordinary. I wonder if the latecomer can survive this. More than 2 hours later, Lin Yu slowly stood up. The blood qi in his body was once again abundant, and his eyes were shining brightly. "Have you rested enough?" the man asked. "Please." Lin Yu stood up and said slowly. The two of them then performed their divine powers. With a wave of the green being's hand, ancient trees that reached the heavens began to grow in the surroundings. This was the concrete evolution of his Tao, and it was extremely terrifying. As for the green light being, it was standing on top of an ancient tree. The ancient tree under his feet was like the Jianmu tree that connected heaven and the human world. He couldn't see where it ended. This was the Tao of nature. The green light being had cultivated this Tao to the level of perfection. With a single thought from him, all the ancient trees in the area seemed to have come to life. The branches of the ancient trees began to twist and turn into humanoid creatures surrounding Lin Yu. Lin Yu's eyes shone brightly. Then, Azura's figure appeared and filled the sky. Lin Yu's body was held in the palm of Azura's hand. He was as tall as the sky and came to the opposite side of the man. The two of them were speechless. At this moment, Lin Yu's 8 great void tribes were fully activated. He had comprehended all of the 8 great void tribes, and it had the power to turn something rotten into something magical. The entire sky was now covered by the figures of the 8 great void tribes. The dragon tribe, Azura, Garuda, the 8 units circled around Lin Yu. At this moment, the true dragon silhouette directly charged towards the ancient wood creatures below. Terrifying waves of air swept across the entire world. Even though there were 3 living beings protecting this place, they were still unable to hold on. "You are very strong." In the end, the being in the green light said slowly. The fact that the green glowing man had said this meant that he had already acknowledged Lin Yu. When we were in the true God realm, we were far from being this powerful, a living being said at this moment. At the same time, the being within the yellow light had a heavy aura, and he laughed heartily. "This is not good. Perhaps in the future, he will become the strongest sword and bring an end to the war that has lasted for countless years," Huang Guangling said half-jokingly. However, his words caused the other two to shake their heads repeatedly. That war that lasted for countless years involved too many things. It was not something that could be accomplished by a single person. The yellow glowing man naturally knew how terrifying the war they were talking about was. Every universe was involved in it without exception. It was unavoidable. In Lin Yu's era, there had been a war before. This was also the reason why the 12 universes were weak. At this moment, Lin Yu and the green glowing man were sitting cross-legged in the sky. One was sitting on the builder tree that reached the sky, while the other was sitting on the palm of Azura's silhouette. Their Taos were clashing with each other. Lin Yu's Tao was domineering, suppressing all the Taos in the world under his feet. Only the green glowing man's Tao could contend with it. The dragon tribe's silhouette below was constantly fighting with the creatures born from the ancient wood creatures. The dragon's roar shook the sky. As the sound waves swept across, a large number of ancient trees exploded, turning into essence and dissipating. Although the battle between the two was not intense, the silence gave birth to a boundless threat. They were discussing Tao in the midst of a battle, and it was accompanied by confrontation. Although the two of them did not speak, their illusory Taos were connected, one green and one white, each occupying a corner of the sky. Until a long time later, Lin Yu slowly stood up. There is no strong or weak Tao. It depends on oneself. Then, the moment he stood up, the entire sky was shattering. The green glowing man suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This shocked everyone who did not know what had happened. Then, the builder tree under the green glowing man slowly dissipated, returning to nothingness. In the end, the green glowing being came to the ground, and now all the phenomena that had evolved had dissipated. The green glowing being stood silently in the field and finally spoke slowly. "I've lost." There was indifference in his tone, and he was not sad about his defeat at all. He did not like fighting to begin with, and this time he did not use any killing moves when he saw the latecomer. Lin Yu also understood this during the process of the battle. Lin Yu cupped his hands, just as the other person was about to make a move. All of a sudden, the river of time shattered. Lin Yu's figure gradually became distorted. Now, the battle between the Divine King's token and the murals had come to an end, although they did not know the outcome. Now, the Divine King's token had already found Lin Yu's figure in this river of time. The vast power of time could be seen spreading. As for the so-called karma here, it was extremely mysterious and profound. However, Lin Yu could sense that most of the karma had already been eliminated by the Divine King's token. Everyone, if fate wills it, will meet again in the future. Lin Yu said indifferently, "Remember, our battle is not over yet. I hope that we can still meet again in a certain era, and we can use all of our strength." At this moment, the fiery being stood up. "No problem." Lin Yu nodded. Then, under the power of the Divine King's token, Lin Yu's figure disappeared from this era. When he opened his eyes again, Lin Yu had already returned to the passage. However, the passage had already returned to its original state. Only a drop of the power of time was flowing on it. Lin Yu stared at one of the murals and fell into deep thought. Living beings like this had an endless lifespan. Perhaps they might really meet again at some point in the future. Lin Yu went through the experience of the battle just now. He could sense that his body had improved after coming into contact with the relatively primitive rules of the era. He was only a step away from achieving the Master God realm. It felt like he could have a breakthrough at any time. However, Lin Yu was not in a rush. Instead, he wanted to go through a period of consolidation to polish his true God realm to perfection. He then glanced at the entrance of the cave. The current bayou was also undergoing an intense transformation. 5 foxtails reached out from her back with a misty, immortal glow. They encapsulated Bayu's figure. However, Lin Yu had no idea how much time had passed in the outside world. For cultivators at their level, 100 years was just the blink of an eye. Chapter 1150. Another 2 months passed. At this time, the radiance around Bayu's body was slightly restrained. At a certain point in time, the dense radiance suddenly became blazing. It shrouded the entire space. It even rushed out of the passage and the crater and appeared in the outside world. She should be successful. The second palace master's eyes were filled with surprise. They had high expectations for Bayou. When they were on Sky Island, they had done their best to cultivate her. Now that she had obtained the fortune left by the ancestor, her future would be limitless. She could become the successor of the sacred land and inherit the position of the sacred lord. A few months ago, Patriarch Lu had sensed the changes within. It seemed to have some kind of power of time. Although his cultivation level had dropped, his understanding of the Tao law was very deep. He was worried because he sensed that there were a few more auras below besides Lin Yu's. They were very strong. He knew that even if he was at his peak, he might not be a match for one of the auras. Below the passage, as the green light faded, Bayu's cultivation level had broken through to the sacred realm. Moreover, there seemed to be a mysterious change in her sea of consciousness. A cold expression appeared in Bayu's eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "Thank you for protecting me, Senior." Bayu came to Lin Yu. Cough, cough. Lin Yu coughed softly. Bayu fell into a state of doubt and doubt. Soon after, she cried out in alarm. That was because the process of her accepting the good fortune was too intense. It caused her undergarments to be completely torn apart. However, as she was immersed in joy, she did not notice it. Her flawless figure was very slim and could be said to be perfect. Her waist was slim and slender, and her legs were pure white, slender and natural. Bayu immediately put on her clothes. However, after a long time, the blush on her face disappeared. "Senior, you don't think that I'm a wanton person, right?" Just as Bayu's heart was filled with worry, Lin Yu's words dispelled her worries. Since you have accepted the inheritance, let's go out. The grand event should begin soon. Lin Yu said slowly. Bayu nodded silently. Then, she came to Lin Yu's side and rushed out of the volcano with the help of the king of God's order. Now that Bayu had obtained a creation and her cultivation realm had increased, she could barely resist the blazing aura of the volcano. Therefore, the scene that happened not long ago did not occur. The two auras reappeared in the outside world. He's out. Second Palace Master looked at Lin Yu and Bayu with unconcealable joy on his face. I've already received the ancestor's legacy. Bayu was also overjoyed. He revealed a bracelet on his wrist. It was spotlessly white and flawless. Even the passage of time did not leave the slightest trace on it. The aura it gave off caused the Second Palace Master and Ancestor Lu to be shocked for a while. It definitely surpassed the level of a godly king artifact. However, there seemed to be a seal within it that prevented Bayu from using its full power for a short period of time. Otherwise, with her current saint realm cultivation, she would not be able to control such a magic tool. Second Palace Master asked Bayu to keep the artifact carefully. Unless it was absolutely necessary, she must not reveal it. Now, with the help of this artifact, even if most of Bayu's power was sealed, her supreme power was still hard to resist. Since we've obtained the creation, let's return to Heavenly Island. Second Palace Master said slowly. The three of them nodded. Ancestor Lu rode on the immortal sword and quickly left. After stepping through the teleportation array, they returned to Heavenly Island after more than a year. Now, the entire Heavenly Island was filled with a tense atmosphere, because soon the grand event would begin. They came to the main hall of Heavenly Island. The Lord of the Holy Land and Second Palace Master had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Ancestor Lu's arrival, the Lord of the Holy Land did not give him a good look. He just snorted and turned his head to the side. Third Palace Master was familiar with him. Lord Sword Immortal, you're here? Ancestor Lu nodded. He did not care about the Lord of the Holy Land's cold treatment. Then, on the luxurious seat in the main hall, Bai Xiaoli's figure slowly appeared. You're here. Bai Xiaoli looked at Ancestor Lu and nodded with satisfaction. Greetings, great monster venerable. Ancestor Lu faced Bai Xiaoli. His temperament was still otherworldly, and he did not show any respect or fear. There are still 3 years to the grand event. Now, please stay on Heavenly Island and wait for the grand event to begin. Bai Xiaoli said slowly. Everyone nodded. The Lord of the Holy Land stood up, his face solemn. The 10 Holy Lands that targeted 10 Square World will certainly send out more experts. I don't know if we can resist them. The Lord of the Holy Land looked at Ancestor Lu. Because his cultivation realm had fallen, there was no Ancestor realm in 10 Square World now. The other Holy Lands knew the importance of this grand event, so there might be more than one Ancestor realm expert. This was the point that worried the Lord of the Holy Land. 1,000,000 years ago, their master was the one who had the highest chance of reaching the Ancestor realm in the 10 Direction world. However, due to the joint attack of several forces from the 10 Direction world, he died in the Heaven Burial Ground. To the 10 Square World, this was undoubtedly a very painful blow to the present era's grand event. Don't worry, Ancestor Lu said. He looked very calm, indicating that there was no need to be afraid of the Lord of the Holy Land. Brother Sheng Master looked at Ancestor Lu and asked, Your cultivation realm did not fall? Even the Third Palace Master and the others looked at Ancestor Lu in surprise. One must know that they all had a deep understanding of the terror of spirit formation. Under this spirit formation, it was impossible for an Ancestor realm expert to survive. If it were not for the Second Palace Master's pleading, Ancestor Lu, who was unwilling to leave, would have died on Heavenly Island. Ancestor Lu shook his head. You should know my cultivation realm very well. However, if I really face an Ancestor realm expert, I may not be able to defeat him. Bai Xiaoli stood at the top with a lazy look. His eyes were shining brightly. Obviously, he was very optimistic about Ancestor Lu's cultivation realm. Although he only showed the cultivation of an overgod, There was no doubt that Ancestor Lu's comprehension of the Tao had deepened over the past million years. Facing an Ancestor Realm expert, even if he could not defeat them, he was definitely qualified to fight. Let's leave it at that. We are now the strongest faction in 10 Square World. Bai Xiaoli said tiredly. Although Bai Xiaoli's consciousness had grown stronger after the cultivation in the secret place, reaching the Overgod realm, the 10 great monster kings could sense it. He could not make a move. Doing so would be breaking the rules. At the same time, Bai Xiaoli's pride as one of the 10 great monster kings did not allow him to do so. Chapter 11:51. Time passed by quickly. 3 years passed by very quickly. Spring went by, and autumn came. Under Bai Xiaoli's guidance, Lin Yu was now infinitely close to becoming an overgod. It seemed like he could break through at any time. However, Lin Yu deliberately suppressed it, as if he was not in a hurry to become an overgod. His goal was definitely not to become an overgod, but to reach a higher level. Instead, he wanted to broaden his path forward. That would require him to polish every single realm to a flawless state. Only then would he be able to benefit greatly from it. Then, a huge vortex appeared in the sky. It exuded a wild and primitive aura. An aura of despair surged out from it and into the 10-direction world. The sacred landlord and the others knew that this was the sign of the opening of the 10 great sacred lands' mysterious border zone, the Burial of Heavens. The Burial of Heavens was a place where an unimaginable war had taken place eons ago. Lin Yu had asked Bai Xiaoli about it, but she did not say anything about it. Obviously, knowing about this historical event was not beneficial to Lin Yu. Lin Yu did not dwell on it. Following that, the aura of destruction and despair grew stronger and stronger. The sacred landlord and the others felt that the time had come. With their help, they led the 20 strongest people in the Holy Land toward the crack in the sky. An ancient token appeared in the sacred landlord's hand. It looked like wood, but it was not wood. Although there were cracks on it, it still exuded a powerful aura. The ancient aura it exuded seemed to be even more ancient than the 10-direction world. This was the token to enter the Burial of Heavens. After the passage of time, now only the only force in the 10 great sacred lands still had it. Among the 20 people, apart from the sacred landlord, Lin Yu, and the other 4, the rest were all saints. The one with the highest cultivation was only at the late-stage saint realm. To the forces of the 10 great sacred lands, the 10-direction world had indeed been weak for a long time. Although it was not unrelated to the suppression of the human race by the sacred landlord, the main reason was that the old sacred landlord had died in the Burial of Heavens in the grand event a million years ago. Because of this grudge, the people of the 10 Square World were filled with hatred. They wanted to end it in this grand event. Endless destructive aura surged in the tunnel. Without the existence of the ancient writ, no creatures could safely enter. The sacred landlord was at the front, while Ancestor Lu rode his sword and traveled. Although he looked very old, his otherworldly aura still made people cast sidelong glances one after another. He brought the second palace lord like a pair of immortals. This made the sacred landlord was dissatisfied, but he did not show it immediately. Before entering the tunnel, Bai Yu's face was red. It was despairing and powerful. A relatively safe path had already been opened up here a long time ago. The sacred landlords and the others had already entered a million years ago. They knew this place the best. They reminded everyone to be careful along the way. Their expressions were solemn. They could not even make the slightest mistake in their footsteps. Because there was only a small space here, it was absolutely safe. Even if they took a wrong step, they would pay with their lives. Here, even the divine king experts could feel how small they were. Everyone's expression was very solemn. However, Fengling was at the back. Seeing Bai Yu standing obediently beside Lin Yu, there was an unknown flame in his heart. His eyes were filled with malice. In the sky, there was an aura of extermination. Flying was not allowed. Hence, everyone had been walking on the barren land for a few months. At this moment, a huge altar appeared in front of them. Behind the altar, there was an endless mist. At the same time, Lin Yu could sense that there was a strong aura of origin material in the mist. Presumably, the final location of the battle was behind this fog. Many factions had already arrived on this huge altar a long time ago. As for the world behind the mist, it could only be completely opened by gathering the 10 ancient badges. Chapter 1152. The forces in the black mist saw the beings from the 10-direction world arrive. They cackled eerily. At the same time, the other two forces showed hostility toward the 10-direction world's holy landlords. Hee hee, you guys have arrived in this world, and yet you still dare to appear. Behind a living being in the black fog, there were more than 10 living beings who exuded powerful auras. There was no doubt that the living beings here were all demons because of the arrangement of the 10 demon monarchs. As for the humans of the 10 great holy lands, perhaps only the 10 great worlds still had a few survivors. Your 10-direction world has truly fallen. You even brought 2 human ants with you. The leader of the Black Mist looked at Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu with disdain. What does that have to do with you? The leader of the 10-direction world's holy land looked at him coldly, his tone hostile. The being in the black mist didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed. It seems that the 10-direction world's spirit hasn't diminished after 1,000,000 years. This time, you won't get lucky. Think about it seriously. Your 3 palace masters are my cauldrons. Perhaps I'll consider letting your 10-direction world go. All right, there are 2 more ants. The being in the black mist revealed his ferocious appearance. Though he had the body of a human, his head was indescribable. He had fish gills, cow horns, and eyes like bronze bells. Patriarch Lu didn't respond to the being's provocation. Ancestor Lu didn't say anything, and Lin Yu also stepped forward. 2 blazing sword lights enveloped the entire altar and slashed at the Holy Spirit. To Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu, the only response they had was to call the being an ant. The creature in the black fog hadn't expected that the 2 ants it had mentioned would actually risk universal condemnation and attack it directly. Patriarch Lu wasn't going to tolerate being humiliated by the second palace master. No matter where they were or what faction they were facing, he would make them pay with blood. The remaining people in the 10-direction world were shocked by Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu's actions. Their 10-square world was weak to begin with. Although they were furious that the creature in the black fog had insulted the 3 palace masters, they did not dare to take action. In everyone's eyes, they were full of admiration for Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu. Bai Yu's eyes were filled with anticipation. She clenched her fists in excitement. You dare to act rashly on the altar? Clearly, the creatures in the black fog hadn't expected this. As for Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu, the remaining forces did not step forward to stop them. Clearly, they were very happy to see this scene. They hadn't even entered the world behind the fog, but their forces had already been depleted. This was good news for them. How dare you? At this moment, the person behind the black fog creature charged out in rage. Are you all planning to start the battle on the altar ahead of time? The being in the black fog roared. However, the only response he got was the blazing immortal sword. Senior Patriarch Lu, I'll hold back these scum. You kill him. Lin Yu stood in the middle, his tone indifferent. Patriarch Lu nodded slightly. Among all the forces of the sacred lands, only the holy lords and a few others remained calm. The rest were so shocked that their jaws dropped to the ground. These 2 humans were a little too ferocious. Without wasting any time, they raised their hands and declared that they would kill the holy lords of the netherworld. The 10 sacred lands were divided into the 10-square world, the netherworld, the green wave world, the ancient vase world, the remnant spirit world, the godly gaze world, the turbid immortal world, the bitter sea world, the opposite shore world, and the Gauchian world. The forces that had besieged the previous holy lords of the 10-square world were the netherworld, the ancient vase world, and the turbid immortal world. At this moment, Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu were facing the forces of the netherworld. In the face of Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu's casual words, the Nether Realm Holy Lord felt that he was being looked down upon and was incomparably enraged. You 2 ants are too arrogant. However, Patriarch Lu had locked onto the holy lords of the netherworld. The immortal sword in his hand exploded with murderous intent. In just 3 moves, the holy lords of the netherworld were bleeding. On the other hand, Lin Yu held the Emperor's sword in his hand and directly cut off the battlefield. At this moment, he was able to stop the remaining Divine King realm experts at the edge of the altar all by himself. Among them, there were 2 overgod experts. Lin Yu did not seem to be at a disadvantage. He was still facing them calmly. This caused all the powers to reveal astonishment in their eyes. These 2 humans were way too strong, weren't they? Just the 2 of them had the momentum to suppress the forces of a sacred land. It could be seen that the holy lords of the netherworld were suppressed by Patriarch Lu and could only passively resist. Even one of his horns had been chopped off. Only half of it was left. No one doubted that it would not take long before the holy lords of the netherworld were killed by Patriarch Lu's immortal sword. The 2 of them were too domineering. Just because the holy lords of the netherworld mocked them, they directly attacked without giving them any chance, until the holy lords of the netherworld were severely injured. At this moment, the forces of the ancient vase realm and the turbid immortal realm attacked. They wanted to stop Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu. At this moment, the other forces also spoke up and blocked Patriarch Lu's immortal sword. This place was filled with an aura of destruction. If they killed someone here, it was very likely that there would be a huge problem. Although some forces were happy to see this scene. However, for safety reasons, they all intervened and stopped this battle. Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu calmly withdrew their swords. They returned to the 10-direction realm. Why were you beaten to such a state by the ant you spoke of? Lin Yu looked at the holy lords of the netherworld, who had fallen to the ground and was being helped up by the god kings behind him. He completely disregarded the dignity of the netherworld. After entering the world behind the mist, I will let you know what despair is. The holy lords of the netherworld almost spat out a mouthful of blood in anger upon hearing Lin Yu's words. I look forward to it, Lin Yu calmly replied. With the arrival of the last force from the opposite shore realm, no one hesitated. The holy lords of the 10 holy lands stepped forward and took out their ancient badges. Whoosh! 10 blazing ancient light beams converged at one spot, dispersing the mist behind the altar for a short period of time. Go in. The holy lords of the 10-direction realm spoke at this moment. The mist was temporarily dispersed. The holy lords of the 10 holy lands allowed everyone to enter. As more and more forces entered, the mist began to gradually recede. Finally, this place returned to its original appearance. Before entering, the holy lords of the netherworld looked at Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu. The killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed. It was tangible. Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu didn't pay much attention to this killing intent. This was because the 10-direction realm and the netherworld were already mortal enemies. There was nothing wrong with teaching them a lesson in advance. Chapter 1153. The world behind the mist was extremely mysterious. Due to the ancient edicts of their respective forces, they were teleported to different regions. This mysterious world was extremely vast. They only had one goal, and that was to enter the depths and obtain the mysterious factor. Therefore, even if they didn't deliberately search for it, they would still meet at the final destination. At this moment, Lin Yu voiced his concerns to the leader of the Holy Land, Patriarch Lu, and the others. When we fought just now, I didn't seem to sense the aura of the progenitor realm among the forces of the nether realm. Could it be that they're deliberately hiding it? The third palace lord said. Because the aura of extinction outside the altar might have restricted the progenitor realm, causing the nether realm to be suppressed, he didn't make a move. Patriarch Lu, on the other hand, rejected this idea. He himself possessed the Tao laws of the progenitor realm. I didn't sense the aura of the progenitor realm behind the forces of the nether realm. However, there are progenitor realm experts in the ancient vase realm and the opposite shore realm. Patriarch Lu slowly said. Although his cultivation was only at the peak of the overgod realm, His comprehension of the progenitor realm was much stronger than that of ordinary progenitor realm experts. Therefore, he was able to sense the aura of the other progenitor realm experts when they fought just now. The leader of the Holy Land nodded slightly. She had changed her opinion of Patriarch Lu when he stepped in to protect the Ten Direction realm, and her tone was gentler now. "Don't let your guard down," Lin Yu finally said. The threat that the Underworld Realm's sacred master had uttered wasn't baseless. Lin Yu already had a bad premonition in his heart. It's very likely that these three forces are secretly working together to attack us. This was the most troublesome matter. This was because the previous Holy Lord of the Ten Direction realm had died 1,000,000 years ago because of this. Although Patriarch Lu was overseeing things now, his cultivation base had fallen. Even if he could restrain the progenitor realm experts, it would be too difficult for him to defeat them, and he might have to pay a huge price. "We've let you down," the leader of the Holy Land finally said. "Don't worry, we didn't do anything wrong." Patriarch Lu didn't pursue the matter. "In that case, we should take the initiative and defeat them one by one." Lin Yu voiced his opinion. Everyone from Nintendo couldn't help but look at Lin Yu. This idea was undoubtedly too bold. If they had joined forces in advance, the 10-square world would have been annihilated. But at the moment, there was no better way. Ancestor Lu nodded and agreed to Lin Yu's proposal. This was the only way to have a chance of winning in the final destination. In order to obtain the mysterious factor, he would not hesitate to use any means. At this time, the specific location of the Nether Holy Land appeared in Lin Yu's hand. A blurry light appeared on Lin Yu's hand, pointing in a certain direction. "So, you already left a trick on the dark underworld Holy Land?" Bai Yu covered her mouth, feeling incredulous. "Since I've already made my move, I might as well leave some cards up my sleeve." Lin Yu's lips curled into a faint smile. The three palace masters' faces were filled with astonishment. At the same time, they sighed inwardly. As expected, the ancestor has his own reasons for bringing him here. Perhaps, with Lin Yu's participation in this event, we might really obtain the mysterious factor. They looked at Lin Yu with admiration in their eyes. "In that case, let's go and hunt the dark underworld Holy Land," Ancestor Lu said slowly. They looked at the direction that Lin Yu's finger pointed at the same time. After completely concealing their auras, they quickly headed in that direction. The Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land can't go out alive. Ancestor Lu stood on the immortal sword and said slowly to the second palace master. Because of what the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld said to the second palace master, he was already a corpse in Ancestor Lu's eyes. The second palace master nodded slightly and looked at Ancestor Lu's side face in a daze. 3 days had passed. In the faint mist, the people of the dark underworld Holy Land appeared in front of Lin Yu and the others. However, looking at the people of the dark underworld Holy Land, they seemed to have a purpose. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the dark underworld had an ancient compass in his hand that was pointing at a certain direction. Moreover, there was a look of surprise on his face. He seemed to be hopeful about what was ahead. Lin Yu and the others clearly saw the expression of the Holy Lord of the dark underworld Holy Land. The ancestor is not dead. He is now in the depths of the burial of heavens. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the dark underworld Holy Land spoke. When the others of the dark underworld Holy Land heard this, they all bowed in the same direction. "I see. The ancestor of the dark underworld Holy Land did not leave the burial of heavens 1,000,000 years ago." At this moment, the Holy Lord of the dark underworld Holy Land spoke. When the ancestor of the dark underworld Holy Land joined forces to besiege the Ten Direction world, he was already at the peak of the Overgod realm. Now, he had stayed in the burial of heavens for 1,000,000 years. There were rich origin materials here. After 1,000,000 years, he had probably broken through to the ancestor realm. Without a doubt, this was bad news. However, Lin Yu and the others had already made a plan. None of the people of the dark underworld Holy Land could escape today. At this moment, the three palace masters and Bai Yu took out the artifact in Bai Yu's hand that was passed down by Bai Xiaoli. A profound aura instantly enveloped the surrounding 100 miles. This place was quickly sealed. It was not until 2 hours later that the people of the dark underworld Holy Land realized that something was wrong. However, it was all too late. It seems like we have been standing in place and not moving forward. Someone in the dark underworld Holy Land said with a deep frown. At this moment, Ancestor Lu and the others slowly walked forward. They were all filled with killing intent. At this moment, the falsified heaven mark on Lin Yu's hand also slowly dissipated. Long time no see. Lin Yu slowly said to the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld. You. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land revealed a look of surprise. What he did not expect was that the people of the 10 Square World dared to leave a tracking method on them and evade all detection. Because they wanted to awaken their ancestor, they did not meet up with the other forces in advance. Now that they had already seen the strength of the 2 humans of the 10 Square World, if they were to face them head-on, they had no chance of winning. The Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land's face was as cold as ice. Although he looked ferocious, there was no trace of blood on his face. However, he did not believe that the 10 Square World would let them go so easily after so long. A battle was inevitable. Ancestor Lu did not give them the slightest chance. Holding the immortal sword in his hand, he directly attacked the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld. In just a moment after arriving in this world, there was nothing to worry about. Ancestor Lu heavily injured the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld with a single sword strike. Lin Yu and the others also attacked. It was a one-sided battle. The battle did not last long. Although the battle was very intense, this world was very vast. On the barren land, there were corpses and bones everywhere. The Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld was already decapitated under Ancestor Lu's sword. The 3 palace masters found the token that connected the ancient pot's sacred ground and the turbid immortal sacred ground from the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld's body suddenly burst out with dazzling light. Then, he flew uncontrollably to an unknown place in the distance. Ancestor Lu slashed out with his sword, wanting to stop him. However, although the light was split into 2, it quickly merged back into 1. There was no time for anyone to react. When the light rushed into a secret place, the stone skin on a sculpture slowly peeled off. A hoarse voice sounded. A million years have passed. Then, the sculpture revealed its emotions. Who destroyed the dark underworld Holy Land? Chapter 1154. The old ancestor of the Netherworld's sacred grounds' eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. Although he did not know who killed the Netherworld sacred lord and the others, he had to avenge them. However, he still needed some time to recover. Fortunately, the Netherworld sacred lord had locked onto the aura of Lin Yu and the others before he died. The day I recover will be the day you die. The old ancestor of the Netherworld's sacred ground gradually fell into a deep slumber. Lin Yu and the others did not know about this. They had already sent a message to the ancient pot's sacred ground and were waiting for the fish to take the bait. Lin Yu and the others had already set up countless traps. The ancient pot's sacred ground had already received the message. The Netherworld sacred ground had already found the location of the group from the 10 Square World. They were waiting for them to come and kill them. This hatred that had lasted for 1,000,000 years would be completely eliminated. The ancient pot's sacred ground has already sent back a message. They will be here in a month. The 10 Square World sacred lord said with joy in his eyes. After waiting for 1,000,000 years, he finally had the chance to take revenge. Master, we'll be able to avenge you soon. The 3 palace masters' eyes were filled with tears. The scene from 1,000,000 years ago was still imprinted in their minds and could never be erased. However, we can't stay here for too long. Otherwise, the ancient pot's sacred ground will be suspicious. Lin Yu said slowly, expressing his worries. The 3 palace masters nodded in agreement. After a short rest, they cleaned up the corpses of the Netherworld's sacred ground. Then, the group from the 10 Square World continued to move forward. Since the previous sacred lord of the netherworld sacred ground has been hiding in the heaven burial ground, the ancient pot sacred ground must have some tricks up their sleeves. We must be careful. The third palace master reminded them as they moved forward. A month passed quickly. Ancestor Lu's divine sense covered a radius of 100 miles. At this moment, he sensed danger approaching. "They're here," he said casually. At this moment, Lin Yu and the others had transformed into the appearance of the netherworld's sacred lord. The three palace masters brought Bai Yu with them and used the supreme divine weapon given by Xiaoli to set up restrictions around the area. The people from the ancient pot's sacred ground also concealed their aura. They were worried that they would expose themselves and alert the enemy. Because Lin Yu and the others had spread the news that the netherworld's sacred ground had been secretly following the 10 Square World. They were waiting for the people from the ancient pot and turbid immortal sacred ground to arrive. At this time, Lin Yu had already taken out the communication token in his hand and asked the people of the ancient pot holy ground to gather here first. Friends from the netherworld sacred ground. The sacred lord of the ancient pot sacred ground came. The creatures of the ancient pot holy ground all had human heads and snake bodies. Their diamond-shaped pupils were bloodthirsty and cold. Anyone who looked at them would feel a chill run down their spine. Fellow Taoists, at this moment, Lin Yu, who had transformed into the Nether Holy Lord, walked forward with a smile. God grounds S. The sacred lord of the ancient pot's sacred ground was cautious. He looked at Lin Yu and the others. "I've already set up a tracking method on the 10 Square World survivors. Fellow Taoist ancient pot, don't worry," Lin Yu said calmly. "They're just 100 miles ahead." "I see." The ancient pot sacred lord nodded. "But I wonder why the netherworld sacred ground is missing a few people. Not long ago, we accidentally entered a dangerous place and lost a few people," Lin Yu explained. "It's a pity that the netherworld's sacred ground is in such a predicament," the ancient pot sacred lord said. "A little sacrifice is inevitable in order to save the old ancestor." Lin Yu shook his head. Although he couldn't bear to see the netherworld's sacred lord, he still said magnanimously. Then, Lin Yu's nether holy lord seemed to have thought of something and asked with concern, "Old holy lord Goog who? Have you found him?" Hearing nether saint lord's question, ancient pot saint lord's worries were completely dispelled. "The old saint lord is in the depths of this world. He still needs some time to recover." Lin Yu nodded slowly. "The two old sacred lords have great perseverance. I'm sure they've achieved great things. The mysterious factor this time will belong to us." Lin Yu also learned from the ancient pot's sacred lord that the ancient pot's sacred lord and the old sacred lord of the netherworld sacred ground were still in the depths of this world. They needed someone to wake him up. In this case, the 10 Square World's plan was flawless. "Why haven't the people of the turbid immortal sacred ground arrived yet?" Lin Yu asked. "I don't know." The ancient pot sacred lord frowned. "Those guys are never in a hurry. Could it be that they've gone to the depths because the old sacred lord is in there?" Lin Yu asked in the form of the dark nether saint lord. Lin Yu reminded the ancient pot sacred lord. The ancient pot sacred lord was suddenly enlightened. "Those guys, are they going to betray us?" "Taoist nether. If that's the case, let's work together and eliminate the remnants of the 10 Square World first. Then, we'll wake up the old sacred lord." The ancient pot sacred lord made a prompt decision. "I was thinking the same thing." Lin Yu, who was in the form of the dark nether sacred lord, nodded. Lin Yu had ancient pot sacred lord fall into his trap with just a few words. "The remnants of the 10 Square World are now 1,000 miles away. Let's not waste any time. Taoist ancient pot, let's hurry over." Lin Yu, who had transformed into the netherworld's sacred lord, had a murderous look in his eyes. "I must make them pay a painful price for the blood feud on the altar." The ancient pot's sacred lord was stunned. He didn't expect the nether sacred lord to bring it up. He couldn't help but smile. The nether sacred lord was beaten up too badly on the altar. He was practically the laughingstock of the 10 great sacred grounds. However, the ancient pot's sacred lord thought that the nether sacred lord might have brought it up intentionally. He was a little annoyed that the ancient pot's sacred ground didn't help him on the altar. Let's put in more effort to eliminate the remnants of the 10-square world. The ancient pot sacred lord thought, if the two sacred grounds work together, even the two humans of the 10-square world wouldn't be able to do anything to them no matter how strong they were. However, the ancient pot sacred lord didn't know who would be the meat on the chopping block. With Lin Yu and the rest of the people from the 10-direction world leading the way, it didn't take them long to cover the distance of 1,000 li Taoist nether. Why don't I see the remnants of the 10-square world? The ancient gourd holy master finally realized that something was amiss. His brows were tightly knitted together. Aren't the remnants of the 10-square world you mentioned here? The figures of Lin Yu and the others slowly changed. It's you, the human expert from the 10-square world. The ancient pot sacred lord's expression changed. They finally realized that they had fallen into a trap. But it's too late for you to realize it now. The three palace masters also revealed themselves in the void at that moment. You've already destroyed the nether sacred ground. The ancient pot sacred lord finally realized something. His face was filled with fear. Since the sacred grounds are plotting against the 10-square world, there's no need for you to continue living in this world. The 10-square world's sacred lord said coldly. Do you still remember how many lives of the 10-square world were stained with your blood 1,000,000 years ago? Chapter 1155. The Sacred Lord of 10-Square World clearly remembered that the current Sacred Lord of Ancient Pot had killed many of her fellow disciples 1,000,000 years ago. The sins she had committed in 10-Square World were too numerous to be recorded. The three palace masters stood out at the same time. Their auras shrouded the ancient pot sacred lord. Ancestor Lu stood at the side. The immortal slaying sword in his hand gave off a terrifying aura. Everyone from the ancient pot sacred ground retreated. When they were on the altar, they had already experienced how terrifying Ancestor Lu was. But now, everything within a circumference of 100 miles had been sealed off. The ancient pot sacred ground was doomed. The besieged ancient pot sacred lord was covered in blood in no time. His entire arm was smashed into pieces by the combined efforts of the three palace masters. The three palace masters had witnessed the tragic deaths of their fellow disciples and their master 1,000,000 years ago. Now that they were facing their enemies, they had to use their strongest techniques. Even the ancient pot's sacred lord, who was at the peak of the overgod realm, could not fight back against the attacks of the three palace masters. The battle lasted for a long time. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu seemed to be unstoppable at this moment. Facing the remaining 4 divine king realm cultivators, they were completely overpowered. In less than 2 hours, they had killed all the divine king realm cultivators. Facing their enemies, the living beings of 10-Square World were furious. They could not wait to devour the flesh and blood of the people from the ancient pot sacred ground. In the end, the ancient pot sacred lord shouted. At this moment, the rest of the people from the ancient pot holy grounds were bursting forth with a terrifying power. Then, under the control of the ancient pot sacred lord, they all exploded into blood mist. Endless energy gathered towards the ancient pot sacred lord. The ancient pot sacred lord's cultivation base was rising steadily. In the end, he was almost at the ancestor realm. At this moment, the three palace masters were sent flying. The ancient pot sacred lord was going to make his last stand. Ancestor Lu appeared in the sky, isolating the terrifying aura. Then he slashed out with his sword. Endless sword chi turned into an ocean and enveloped the ancient pot sacred lord. No! The ancient pot sacred leader screamed in fear. His voice was extremely shrill, but it was all in vain. After the sword chi, the world fell into silence. The gray sky descended again. The ancient pot holy ground was completely destroyed. The blood rain that filled the sky sprinkled down, but Ancestor Lu and the three palace masters stood in the middle, untainted by a speck of dust. No one had expected that 2 holy lands would be completely wiped out in just a few months after entering this world. After doing all this, Lin Yu and the others did not continue to contact the turbid immortal Holy Land because they had already obtained the exact information. In the turbid immortal Holy Land, there were ancestor realm powerhouses now. However, now that there was only the turbid immortal Holy Land left, the pressure on the 10 square world would undoubtedly be much less. Next, we need to improve our overall strength. The 10 direction world discovered a secret place in this world, said the 10 direction world's Saint Lord. We have 100 years left. This was also the main reason why the 10 great holy lands would bring talented youths into the sky burial ground. Although this place was dangerous, it was also accompanied by great fortune. The rich origin substance could allow a person to advance quickly. This was what Bai Xiaoli had told Lin Yu when they were in the 12 universes. It could allow him to break through quickly and deal with the invasion of the 10th universe. It took them a year to arrive at the secret place mentioned by the 10 direction world's Saint Lord. This place looked very ordinary, no different from the other regions. However, as the 10 direction world's Saint Lord walked forward, a mysterious power appeared in his palm. It seemed like a layer of restriction had been opened. Endless origin substance began to pour into the secret place. Let's go in. We'll cultivate here for 100 years. After 100 years, what we'll face will not be as simple as the turbid immortal Holy Land. The 10 direction world's Saint Lord said worriedly. Their opponents would be the other holy lands in the final battle for the mysterious factor. Although there was no enmity between them, when it came to the mysterious factor, there was no friend or foe to speak of. The final battle in the deepest part of the secret place was bound to be bloody. Bai Yu and the others' eyes were solemn. They sensed the rich origin substance. Without hesitation, they stepped into the secret place. Although Bai Yu still wanted to follow Lin Yu before entering, she was rejected by him. The most important thing now was to use the origin substance to increase their strength. It was not the time to talk about love. Bai Yu's face was filled with unconcealable sadness, but she quickly recovered. At the same time, she realized that her thoughts were too childish. Senior, I'm sorry. I didn't know the severity of the matter. Bai Yu apologized sincerely. Lin Yu shook his head. However, after experiencing 100,000 years of reincarnation, he understood that he would not easily accept a woman's love. The group separated and agreed to meet again after 100 years. As Lin Yu entered the depths of the origin substance, everything returned to normal. Lin Yu could clearly feel that the origin substance in his body that he had refined a long time ago was moving. It seemed to be cheering as it sensed the same substance. As Lin Yu moved forward, Lin Yu also realized that the origin substance here seemed to be different from what he had absorbed and refined in the 12 universes. It seemed that the origin substance of the 12 universes was more primitive and the power nurtured in it was purer. Lin Yu also guessed something at this moment. Perhaps this was why the 10th universe sent the divine king realm cultivators over at all costs. This was because the origin substance of the 12 universes was more primitive and had greater benefits for the powerhouses. However, the origin substance here was very rich and could make up for the difference in quality. Lin Yu followed the guidance of the origin substance in his body and found the place where the origin substance was the richest. Without hesitation, he took out the Emperor's sword and placed it beside him. Then, he activated the cultivation technique in his body and began to absorb the origin substance here. Like a whale swallowing a cow, the origin substance here directly turned into a huge vortex and appeared above Lin Yu's head. The impurities in it were eliminated and entered Lin Yu's body at a shocking speed. If anyone saw this scene, their jaws would definitely drop to the ground. This kind of speed was simply too shocking. Perhaps even the progenitor realm cultivators could not absorb the origin substance at such a speed. At this moment, Lin Yu's body was already suffused with a white halo. It was incomparably sacred, and now, the precipitation had almost reached the limit and could no longer be suppressed. Lin Yu recalled his previous cultivation realm and made it completely flawless. Then, an even more terrifying absorption speed attacked. At this moment, Lin Yu had completely broken through to the Overgod realm and was standing at the peak of the Divine King realm. However, after breaking through to the Divine King realm, Lin Yu did not stop but continued to absorb the origin substance. His cultivation realm was rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. This was because he had already broken through to the progenitor realm when he was in the saint realm. At this moment, as long as he had enough origin substance to precipitate, breaking through to the progenitor realm would be a matter of course. It was just that after reaching the Divine King realm, each breakthrough would take a long time and could no longer be measured in years. However, the time given to Lin Yu was not that much. He had to have the strength to wipe out all enemies before the invasion of the 10th universe. At this moment, he had to raise his strength so that he could successfully obtain the mysterious factor that Bai Xiaoli needed. Chapter 11:56. At this moment, someone finally noticed the disturbance in the depths of the secret place. Lin Yu's rate of absorption and refinement was just too intense. All the origin matter in the boundless region gathered towards him. The origin matter turned into a storm that swept through the entire secret place. It did not calm down for a very long time. Who has caused such a disturbance? The three palace masters, who had high cultivation, unconsciously looked at the location where Lin Yu was cultivating. Although they had guessed something, they could not help but reveal shocked expressions in the face of such a scene. Is it that young man again? Patriarch Lu stood in the secret place and looked in Lin Yu's direction as he said slowly. 100 years passed in a flash. Lin Yu, who had been sitting in silence for 100 years, opened his eyes at this moment. The depth in his eyes flashed. Time had not left any traces on him. He was young again. He stood up slowly and drew the Emperor's sword from his side. Old friend, Lin Yu looked at the Emperor's sword that had become more and more wondrous. Due to the baptism of the origin matter, the Emperor's sword had undergone a metamorphosis. It now possessed a simple intelligence. It could sense that Lin Yu had regained control over it. It trembled with joy. Lin Yu smiled faintly. It was now the day they had agreed upon. Lin Yu looked at the unknown place in front of him. It seemed that the fluctuations of mysterious factors had begun to appear in this world. Is the final battle about to begin? There was no fear in Lin Yu's eyes at all. Instead, there was eagerness. He wanted to test himself and see what level his battle prowess had reached. Lin Yu was currently at the peak of Overgod. His body and senses of his soul were both flawless. He was much more powerful than regular Overgods. Lin Yu guessed that he should be able to defeat Overgods easily with his current strength. He might even be able to put up a fight against half-step progenitors. His figure disappeared from where he stood. In just a short time, they had already arrived at the periphery of the secret land. Ancestor Lu and the others had already been waiting here for a long time. Congratulations, God King Lin. Your cultivation base has improved. At this moment, the three palace masters stepped forward and congratulated Lin Yu on his breakthrough into the God King realm. I was lucky. Lin Yu returned the greeting. At this time, the rest of the people in the 10 square world also came out of seclusion one after another. 100 years had passed, and their cultivations had all made significant progress. This was especially true for Baiyu. With their current realms, it was merely 100 years. On the other hand, Baiyu's cultivation had broken through 2 levels and reached the late-stage Sage realm. However, this caused the 3 palace masters to be filled with worry. Not only the 3 palace masters, but Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu had also discovered the hidden dangers. Baiyu's breakthrough had been too rushed, causing her cultivation to be unstable. It was very likely that it would have an unimaginable impact on her future cultivation. Why are you so stupid? The 3 palace masters had reproachful looks on their faces. I want to do my part in the final battle, Baiyu said. I don't want all of you to face danger alone. Although the 3 palace masters were gratified, their expressions were solemn. You are the hope of the 10 square world. We brought you here to gain experience. You don't have to worry about the mysterious factor. The 10 square world's Holy Lord's expression was solemn. It's very kind of you to have such intentions. We are very gratified. The second palace master stroked the back of Bayu's hand and said slowly. Bayu lowered her head and replied, Second master, little you understands. They didn't stop. After opening the secret place, they went deeper into the secret place. However, their eyes were filled with worry. The old Nether Holy Lord must have awakened by now. In the entire 10-square world, there was no one who could rival him. Brother Lu, please keep this. At this moment, the second palace master stepped forward and handed the bracelet in by Yu's hand to Ancestor Lu. This is what we all agreed upon. The 10-square world's Holy Lord nodded. When Patriarch Lu had made a move on the altar for the sake of the Second Imperial Empress, her opinion of him had changed completely. Now, she handed the supreme artifact that by Xiaoli had passed down to Patriarch Lu so that he would have a way to deal with the progenitor realm experts in the future. Do you believe me now? Patriarch Lu said with a smile. It's just that I have no choice but to do this in order to obtain the mysterious factor. The 10-square world's Holy Lord didn't want to be outdone. His expression turned cold again. Patriarch Lu only smiled faintly. However, he still kept the supreme artifact. Although he was joking, he knew what they were going to face in the following situation. What they didn't know was that at the end of the world, there were already two old figures standing there. They looked like they had crawled out of a grave, exuding a rotten aura. One of them had ox horns and fish gills, while the other had a snake head and a human body. Both of them exuded a terrifying aura. It seemed like the destructive aura here didn't have much effect on the two of them. Our cultivation here for 1,000,000 years was not in vain. Congratulations, old friend, for breaking through to the progenitor realm. The old Holy Lord of the ancient gourd holy ground said. However, our disciples and grand disciples are all dead. The old Holy Lord of the Nether Holy Ground sighed. The old ancestors already sensed it 1,000,000 years ago. This grand meeting is extremely important. That's why we didn't hesitate to pay the price and stayed here. A little sacrifice is nothing. The old Holy Lord of the ancient gourd holy ground spoke again. It was as if one couldn't see the emotions of a living being from his body. The aura of the 10-square world has appeared. At this moment, two beams of light burst out from the old Holy Lord of the Nether Holy Ground, shattering the void. The silhouettes of Lin Yu and the others were reflected in their eyes. Patriarch Lu's gaze suddenly looked in a certain direction. They have already sensed us. This caused everyone's expressions to become unsightly. However, Patriarch Lu's next words made everyone feel as if they were in an ice cellar. There are two progenitor realm experts. They should be the two from the ancient gourd holy ground and nether holy ground. Now that they have awakened, they have met up with each other. Patriarch Lu had cultivated in the secret place for 100 years. His cultivation realm had recovered to some extent. Naturally, his divine senses were not the same as before. It seems like there is another powerful expert in the 10-square world. The old Holy Lord of the ancient gourd holy ground said slowly, Let's go and meet these juniors. I wonder if they'll be able to walk out of this world alive without the protection of their master. Then, the two of them turned into dim lights and rapidly approached the people from the 10-square world. This speed was beyond the scope of knowledge of living beings. In almost an instant, they had crossed a large area. They are here. Patriarch Lu's brows were tightly knitted together at this moment. Although they had noticed that the ancient gourd holy lord had spread the news during the battle to destroy the ancient gourd holy ground, they had neglected the connection between the two old holy lords of the ancient gourd holy ground. Lin Yu was very calm because he had already expected this. It was just that he had no way to deal with it. What he could do before entering was already the best plan. Use all your strength to get closer to the depths. Lin Yu said, Let's hope that the distance between them can support us until we reach the depths where the mysterious factor exists. Lin Yu sighed. When the time comes, we can only rely on you to stop the two of them. This was the best plan at the moment. Without a plan, they could only compete with their speed. Patriarch Lu gave his imperial sword art to Lin Yu. In the 10-square world, only he and Lin Yu had the highest cultivation realm and could support the consumption of the imperial sword art. This was because Lin Yu's not heaven needed to leave a mark in order to unleash its maximum speed. If he used it normally, it would not be as fast as the Imperial Sword Art. With Lin Yu's talent, he quickly grasped the Imperial Sword Art. Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu each led a group of people and rushed towards the depths. How did their speed suddenly become so fast? The old holy lord of the ancient gored holy ground was puzzled. Chapter 1157. Ancestor Lu's swordsmanship was the best since ancient times, and the profoundness of the sword-controlling technique was unparalleled. In terms of speed, even if a divine king displayed it, even an ancestor would find it hard to match. Although Lin Yu had just grasped it in terms of speed, it was also extremely fast. It was as if the ground had shrunk into an inch, and in the blink of an eye, it was unknown how far they had traveled. But even so, Ancestor Lu's brows were tightly knitted because he had already sensed that the two holy lords of the Nether Holy Land and Ancient Pot Holy Land were getting closer and closer to them. And they seemed to be able to sense the specific location of the people of the 10 Square World. No one knew what the reason was. The only possibility was that before the Holy Lord of the Nether Holy Land was killed, he had left some kind of mark on one of them. And they all knew that now all the Holy Lands were heading towards the depths to fight for the mysterious factor. They only needed to block in front, and the people of the 10 Square World would walk right into the trap. Lin Yu was also sighing lightly at this time. In the end, they would encounter the two ancestor. It was just a matter of time. This world was very vast. A few days had passed, and Lin Yu and the others had already traveled an unknown distance. They only sensed that the aura of the mysterious factor in front had become stronger and stronger, reflecting on the entire dusky sky. It was colorful, with an aura that made people fascinated. And around the mysterious factor, there was also a rich origin substance that could not be dissolved. Sensing from afar, Lin Yu already knew that the quality and quantity of the origin substance here had completely surpassed the origin substance that was absorbed and refined in the secret place before, until a deep abyss appeared in front of them, stretching for an unknown distance. Below him was a black fog that could frighten one's mind. It was like a black dragon that was rolling around. There was only a broken cable bridge between the two parts of the final destination. There were already forces fighting on it, and even a great battle had already broken out. There were not many living beings who entered the burial place, but now, for the mysterious factor, they were all willing to pay any price. Even if they fell into the abyss, they would drag someone down with them. Endless power was vented on the chain bridge. This was a great battle between Ancestor Realm experts. It was the hidden Ancestor Realm experts of the Green Wave Realm and the Bitter Sea Realm who were fighting at this time. The chain bridge was shaking violently, on the verge of collapse due to the battle between the two Ancestor Realm experts. A large number of living beings from other forces also suffered an unexpected calamity and fell into the abyss one after another. Even a Saint Realm expert was so insignificant in the abyss that he couldn't even resist. The abyss had a mysterious and majestic power. No matter what your cultivation was, it was difficult to resist. At this moment, two heart-palpitating auras appeared at the starting point of the chain bridge. The figure had a cruel smile on his face. 10 Direction World's remnants, you're finally here. Yu Ming and the old holy masters of the ancient Pot Holy Land said slowly. Clearly, this was the only way to reach the final destination. This cable bridge was the only way. There was no other way. Netherworld and the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land had already used all of their cultivation bases to rush over. Everyone from the 10 Square World wore a solemn expression as they stared at the two figures in front of them who were emitting terrifying auras. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu were as calm as an ancient well. At this time, they slowly stood up. Two ants at the peak of the Divine King realm want to stop us. The old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land and the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land said coldly. When the old holy master of the ancient pot holy land looked at Ancestor Lu, his expression changed slightly. You're the one who sensed our presence, right? It's not like I haven't killed an Ancestor Realm cultivator before. Ancestor Lu said casually. At this time, he looked directly at the two without the slightest fear. Ancestor Lu had broken through to the Ancestor Realm a long time ago. It was only because he was on the way to the Heavenly Island that his cultivation base fell. Otherwise, these two who broke through to the Ancestor Realm with the help of the materials here were nothing. However, now that Ancestor Lu's cultivation base had fallen, it was already very difficult for him to resist an Ancestor Realm cultivator. As for Lin Yu, although his cultivation base had condensed, it was impossible for him to defeat an Ancestor Realm cultivator. A Sage Realm cultivator was like an ant in front of an Ancestor Realm cultivator. Now, the only people who could resist the old holy master of the ancient pot holy land were Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu only looked at the two indifferently with fearless eyes. Today's battle was unavoidable. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu knew that if the ancient pot holy land and the netherworld holy land could not deal with it, they would have no chance of winning in the final fight for the mysterious factor. In addition to the ancient pot holy land and the netherworld holy land, they still had to face the other 5 holy lands. In that case, let's fight. Ancestor Lu looked at the two indifferently. The immortal sword in his hand bloomed with a bright radiance, illuminating the entire universe. The black fog in the abyss retreated at this time, as if it could not withstand the aura of Ancestor Lu's sword light. At this time, the old holy master of the ancient pot holy land and the netherworld holy land's expression changed. This was because Ancestor Lu's aura was really terrifying. In their eyes, although Ancestor Lu's aura was only at the Divine King realm, when he held the immortal sword in his hand, they vaguely felt that their lives were slipping away. Your realm shouldn't be at the Divine King realm. The old holy master of the ancient pot holy land said at this time. I guess you must be an Ancestor realm cultivator before. If you want to fight, why bother talking nonsense? Ancestor Lu was very indifferent from the beginning. He said slowly, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. In these millions of years, he had been silent for too long. Ancestor Lu was a person who knew his place. Otherwise, he would not have arrived at the 10 great holy lands and fallen in love with the second palace master of the 10 direction world. He ended up like this. However, in his heart, he did not regret it. At this time, when he entered the place where heaven burial was, he did not have the slightest complaint. In his heart, as long as he could be together with the second palace master of the 10 direction world, it was enough. Even if they could not sleep together in life, they must sleep together in death. Before Ancestor Lu came here, he had already prepared for this. At this time, Ancestor Lu looked at the second palace master. The corner of his mouth was filled with a trace of a smile. In the eyes of the second palace master, it was like a million years ago. Senior, we may not be able to get out today. Lin Yu faced the 2 old holy masters of the ancient pot holy land and the netherworld holy land with a smile, and said half-jokingly. However, in his eyes, there was not the slightest trace of fear. The Emperor's sword in his hand trembled slightly, as if it was responding to Lin Yu. It's a pity that I did not meet you in the era of my rise. Otherwise, we may be bosom friends. Ancestor Lu looked at Lin Yu and said indifferently, Aren't we bosom friends now? Lin Yu asked rhetorically. That's not wrong. After we get out, let's drink to our heart's content. Ancestor Lu said with a smile at this time. Lin Yu nodded slowly. It would be impolite to decline. At this time, the two of them took a step forward at the same time. The origin material here was retreating, as if it could not withstand the aura emitted by Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu. At this time, the old holy masters of the ancient pot holy land and the netherworld holy land were shocked. Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu's aura was too strong, completely unlike the aura of Divine King realm cultivators. Chapter 1158. His demeanor and temperament made everyone's expression change. On the other hand, Guhu and the old saint of the netherworld's sacred ground looked at them with disdain. After all, the two of them were just divine king realm cultivators. Ants trying to shake a tree. The old Nether Saint Lord and ancient Nether Saint Lord spoke slowly with disdain. Everyone in 10 Square World was worried for Lin Yu because Lin Yu's strength was only at the peak of the divine king realm. It was impossible for him to defeat an ancestor realm cultivator. This was simply going against the heavens. However, only Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu could stand up against an Ancestor Realm expert. Ancestor Lu had by Xiaoli's supreme weapon, so he might be able to end the battle quickly. What Lin Yu needed to do was to stop the old Nether Saint Lord from ancient Nether Saint Lord. Powerful auras radiated from the two old Nether Saint Lords, causing everyone's spirit to hurt and feel like it was being torn apart. Step back, Ancestor Lu said faintly. Sharp sword intent radiated from his body, escorting the people from 10 Square World a few miles away. The battle between Ancestor Realm experts affected a wide area, causing the world to collapse. The people from 10 Square World would only be a burden to Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu. There were also Ancestor-level experts among the several forces in front of them. It was unrealistic to let the people from 10 Square World go ahead first. None of you from 10 Square World can leave today. The old Nether Saint Lord of ancient Nether Saint Lord's lips curled into a cruel smile. With a wave of his hand, he sealed off the area. No one could leave. Back then, your master chose to bring up the rear. Let's see how you can escape now. Hearing the word master, the 3 Nether Saint Lord's eyes were filled with extreme anger, especially the 3rd Nether Saint Lord, who was about to step forward and fight. Bastard of the 10 Square World, today, you'll accompany your short-lived teacher. The old Nether Saint Lord of ancient Nether Saint Lord continued. The 2nd Nether Saint Lord held down the 3rd Nether Saint Lord's arm and shook his head slightly. They were only true gods now, so it was futile for them to fight. Even the 10 Direction World's Saint Lords felt a deep sense of powerlessness. Guhu and the old master of the dark nether sacred land had stayed in the sky burial ground for 1,000,000 years. Their cultivation bases had long reached the peak. Now that they had broken through to the ancestor realm, there was no one in the 10 great sacred lands who could stop them. As long as the two of them joined forces, no one in the entire sky burial would be a match for them. Looking at Lin Yu, the ancient Kettle Holy Master did not say anything more. He struck out immediately. An unparalleled amount of power came crashing down on Lin Yu, as though the entire heavens were crashing down. The Emperor's sword in Lin Yu's hand exploded with resplendent radiance. At the same time, the Great Void 8 was activated. Lin Yu's first move was a killer move. This was the only way to stop the ancient Pot Holy Master. The ground above the abyss was shaking uncontrollably. Large amounts of gravel were falling down into the endless abyss. There was no sound at all, as if there was no end to this abyss. Lin Yu was sent flying. But what made everyone flabbergasted was that Lin Yu was not injured under the Ancestor Realm's absolute power attack. Moreover, his aura was still blazing. You're not bad. Even the old Holy Master of the ancient Pot Holy Ground, who was fighting against him, could not help but praise him. And this was just the beginning. Lin Yu faced the ancient Pot Holy Master. The Emperor's sword in his hand vibrated. Under everyone's astonished gaze, he took the initiative to attack. Is this going against the will of the immortal realm? Everyone in the 10-corner world muttered softly. Bai Yu's eyes were filled with worry. Survive, senior. They all knew that although Lin Yu's performance had exceeded their expectations, it was still extremely difficult for him to defeat an Ancestor Realm expert. This was something they knew. Lin Yu knew it too. Hence, he used his full strength in his first move. Otherwise, he would not stand a chance. Even so, Lin Yu could only barely withstand the attack. The shocking sword light lit up the entire universe. Ancestor Lu struck. The sky seemed to have been sliced open. It left behind a crack that was difficult to heal. Ancestor Lu held a sword in one hand and a supreme artifact in the other. He struck out with a powerful killing move. The Nether Holy Master was sent flying a few hundred feet before he could stabilize himself. No wonder my disciple died in your hands. He finally understood when he looked at Ancestor Lu. However, even he felt an enormous amount of pressure. Your cultivation is not as simple as a peek over God, the Nether Holy Master said with certainty. This was because Ancestor Lu's sword contained the laws of Tao. It was definitely not inferior to an overgod. Instead, it had already transcended. It was definitely much more profound than an ordinary Ancestor Realm expert. Ancestor Lu remained silent. Before the old Holy Master of the Dark Nether Saint Land could stabilize himself, he attacked again. The sword light in Ancestor Lu's hand was not dazzling. However, it gave off a feeling of returning to simplicity. Every sword strike contained an extremely powerful force. Moreover, they were all condensed together. The strike seemed to be able to slice open the entire universe. With the support of the Supreme Artifact, Ancestor Lu's strength was no weaker than an Ancestor Realm expert. Moreover, his comprehension of the Ancestor Realm had far surpassed the Nether Holy Master's. This made the Nether Holy Master's expression change. Under the attack of the immortal sword, he felt as if his immortal body was being torn apart. This also made the Nether Holy Master not dare to face Ancestor Lu head-on. A dark gold staff appeared in his hand. It was intertwined with Tao and truth. Even so, cracks still appeared under Ancestor Lu's almost decayed sword. This was the artifact that the Nether Holy Master had forged with his life. As he broke through to the Ancestor Realm, the dark gold staff naturally broke through that step. Due to its special material, it could definitely be passed down as an immortal inheritance artifact. At this moment, a crack had appeared on the dark gold staff because of Ancestor Lu's attack. It could not be restored. This surprised the Nether Holy Master. However, things had already come to this. He was being suppressed again and again. He could not care less. It was no longer the time to feel sorry for the artifact. At this moment, the Nether Holy Master was truly enraged. The battle between Ancestor Realm experts was extremely terrifying. Black Chi rampaged as sword light filled the air. It completely drowned the place. At this moment, the beings from the other forces on the chain bridge all looked over at the same time. They were all shocked by the performance of Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu. The ones fighting with the Nether Holy Master and the Ancient Pot Holy Master are actually those two humans. They could still clearly remember the strength and dominance that Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu displayed on the altar. However, there was confusion on their faces. Why don't I see the others from the Nether Holy Master and the Ancient Pot Holy Master? At this moment, they realized something. Could it be that the Ancient Pot Holy Master and the Nether Holy Master have been destroyed? The two old Holy Masters are blocking the people from the Ten Direction world. Because of this was undoubtedly a great earthquake in the 10 Great Holy Lands. The beings from a holy land were all wiped out. Moreover, those who entered the burial ground were all the top cultivators in the Holy Land. This could very well cause a holy land to fall completely. It would not be able to recover even after millions of years. The strength of those two humans is only at the Overgod realm. How can they fight with Ancestor Realm experts? At this moment, someone noticed that the cultivation base displayed by Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu is only at the Overgod realm. In particular, Lin Yu's aura seemed to have broken through to the Overgod realm not long ago. However, he was already at the peak. Facing the overwhelming pressure of the Ancestor Realm aura, he was able to persist and not be defeated. This caused everyone to be astonished. They were dumbfounded and no longer knew what to say. The scene in front of them had gone beyond their understanding. The Ancestor Realm was invincible. They were living beings who had truly transcended. They were no longer at the level of cultivators in this world. They were absolutely invincible in the 10 Great Holy Lands. And now, someone was actually going against the flow and killing immortals right in front of them. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.